Phil Moriarty, our MC, is unable to be with us tonight. He's presently on an investigation, and will shortly be exposing that corruption. So I'm taking place this evening as the introducer of Ted Gunderson. I personally have known Mr. Gunderson for a few years, and Mr. Gunderson has quite an extensive history in exposing corruption. Mr. Gunderson was, as you know, an FBI agent for 28 years. He was special agent in charge. He has written many books, including How to Locate Someone Without Leaving Home, as well as many reports on the Oklahoma bombing, on international child trafficking, international pornography, the Franklin cover-up. He helped assist Senator John DeCamp with as well. So please help me give Mr. Ted Gunderson a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've been asked to announce that Mark Phillips and Kathy O'Brien will be here. Let's see if I can figure it out. Oh, Vernon Lodge, he in Vernon, BC, of course. April the 15th, 7 to 10, Wednesday. So, I'm sure most of you heard Kathy and Mark before. I've known them for quite a few years, and I've confirmed the information that they have furnished through other sources. As a matter of fact, I personally know of one other presidential model in addition to Kathy, and I'm aware of 5 others who are still underground and have not come forward. I'm going to have an interesting evening for you. I assure you, you will not be bored. And I'm going to give you some information that you've never heard before. It's going to shock you, I'm sure. I know it will. But it's true. Everything I have has been documented. If it isn't documented, and it comes from confidential sources or informants, they are reliable, credible sources. I want to start out by explaining how I became involved in these issues. Now, when we talk about these issues, we talk about corruption, pedophilia, pornography, etc. Not pleasant subjects at all, believe me. But I served 27 and a half years in the FBI, retired in 1979. At the time of my retirement, I was in charge of most of Southern California, except for the 2 most southern counties. I was immediately asked to investigate the Dr. Jeffrey R. McDonald case. That's M-A-C-D-O-N-A-L-D. And he's a former Green Beret doctor who was convicted of murdering his wife and 2 children in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, on February the 17th, 1970. This is 79 now, this is a few years later. But he had just been convicted, sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. His doctor friend said, this man did not commit these crimes. Will you, Ted Gunderson, investigate him? And I said, yes, I would, providing, of course, that I continued the investigation on the assumption or on the basis or the fact that he did not commit the crimes. In fact, I told Dr. McDonald, if I learn that you've committed these 3 homicides, these murders, I will discontinue my investigation immediately. Well, I'm still working the case. But what happened in reviewing the case, I learned that evidence was lost, stolen, destroyed, altered. For example, skin under Colette, that's his wife, under her nails disappeared after it was collected by the Army. And anybody that knows anything about forensics knows that from the skin you can tell the blood type of the person who was scratched. This, I'm convinced, would have exonerated Dr. McDonald, but it disappeared. The last person to have it was a fellow named William F. Ivory, who was chief investigator for the Department of the Army. And in 10 months, October 25, 1980, I obtained a confession from a girl named Helena Stokely. Helena, if you know the story, by the way, this was a best-selling book. Also, there's been a movie made by NBC out of New York. And Helena is the girl in the floppy hat with the blonde wig standing on the street corner when the MP, Micah, was en route to the crime scene at about 4:30 in the morning. Didn't stop, of course, because he was en route to a triple homicide. Told his superiors about it, nobody did anything about it, no follow-up. But I learned that Helena had been an informant for the government, also that she'd been an informant for the Fayetteville, North Carolina Police Department. And she was in the area at the time. And so I targeted Helena Stokely. By the way, in my FBI career, 27 and a half years, I never interviewed a suspect when I did not obtain a signed confession. And that's quite a record, believe me. And I said to myself when I heard this case, I hope I don't have to break that record, but I didn't. And I ended up obtaining that confession from Alina. She gave me the details of the homicide, the murder, etc., etc. Now, to confirm that she had been there, I gave her a polygraph. She passed. I told her to draw the interior of the house. She drew it. I told her to describe the furniture in the house. She described the furniture. She described a jewelry box on the dressing table in the master bedroom. To make sure that she was accurate, I went out and bought a Sears Roebuck catalog. Had her look through the jewelry boxes in the Sears Roebuck catalog. She picked out the very jewelry box that was in the house that night. In addition, Helena tried to ride a horse, a rocking horse, in the child's bedroom, the 2.5-year-old's bedroom. The spring was broken. There's no way she would have known the spring was broken if she had not been in the house that particular night. But what happened was that the story behind this is that Helena was involved in distributing her drugs up and down the East Coast. Her cult, the ones that she said committed the murders, were the ones, there were 7 of them in there that particular night. At that time, they were bringing drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of the dead GIs coming out of Vietnam. And Helena's cult, satanic cult group, was distributing them, as I said. And the higher-ups in the drug operation were afraid if there was an investigation of her cult, it could expose the whole operation coming out of South Vietnam. By the way, the CIA was involved in that. And so as a result, basically, they framed Dr. McDonald. The man, as I said, is still serving 3 consecutive life sentences. There is some hope, however. We recently learned that the 2 little girls had black hair under their fingernails. Dr. McDonald is a light brown-haired man, and we have permission from the courts to do a DNA on these hairs and compare them with Dr. McDonald's hair. These will not match, I assure you of that. But anyway, again, going back to the case, reviewing it, FBI agent Paul Stoneball lied before the grand jury. Another agent, Mahoney, lied under oath on the witness stand. And here I am, coming out of the Bureau, a great organization, impeccable reputation, a crack organization. We were probably one of the finest investigative organizations in the history of the world in our day. Not anymore, I'm sorry to say. And I say, hey, what's going on here? So as a result of my work on the McDonald case, and by the way, I submitted a 1,200-page report to the U.S. Department of Justice, and instead of looking at my report and continuing my investigation, FBI agents were going out and interviewing my new witnesses. I developed 19 new witnesses, interviewing Helena Stoke and trying to get them to recant. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on, because all of a sudden I am being attacked, and I received information that I'm a victim of a disinformation program. I'm a homosexual suffering from mental problems, trafficking drugs, and the story goes on and on and on. And as a matter of fact, the government, the U.S. government, even attempted to frame me on a phony drug operation and also on a false charges on a fraud case in Dallas, Texas. What happened on the drug operation is the girl that they had assigned to frame me, Pam Fawcett, ended up after 6 months coming over to my side and telling me the story. And I said to Pam, I said, Pam, well, why did you come over to my side all of a sudden? And I had dealt with her, by the way, on the telephone, but never met her. She said, Ted, I woke up the other morning and I realized you're the only honest son of a bitch I've talked to in 6 months. Those are exact words, by the way. I've got that on tape, so it's confirmed and it's documented. And she even had the run of the FBI office in Modesto, California. She had her own coffee cup. They paid her $2,000 to try to set me up. And the way that she came over to my side is she had a problem with herself and with her son, and I tried to help her as a humanitarian. And she realized that, recognized that, and she realized that the FBI was basically using her. So anyway, I was on national TV, a number of national radio talk shows. I was on CNN and debated Freddie Casab, the father-in-law, on national television, and also they had a psychiatrist there. And I basically gave the story. And the story was, of course, that this satanic cult group had come into the house that night, got out of hand, they popped drugs at midnight, and it was, according to Helena, her initiation into the satanic movement. And you know, folks, people just came out of the woodwork. From the East Coast to the West Coast, north to south, people contacted me, gave me the same basic story about satanic cults and about their ceremonies, multi-generationals. That's a person that's been into the cult, born into it, the mother and father, grandfather, grandmother involved in it. Ritual abuse, that's people, kids usually, that are ritualistically abused rather than straight sexually abused. And the same stories over and over again from people who did not know each other. So I said, there's got to be something to this. And so I started delving into satanic cults. From there, I went to pedophilia, pornography, prostitution, corruption in the courts, law enforcement, corrupt, prosecutors, corrupt. And I basically learned through my research and through my work on the street. By the way, I do more than just research books. I'm out there. I talk to people. And I basically learned that the satanic cult movement in the United States is very, very active. There are in excess of 3 million members. There are between 50 and 60,000 human sacrifices a year. And for you folks up here in Canada, there is a network between the United States and Canada. There's an extensive amount of traffic between the Seattle, Washington area and Vancouver, BC. Children are being auctioned off that are kidnapped in the United States are being auctioned off in Toronto, Canada, among other places. And this is just a drop in the bucket of the information that I developed. I said to myself, where did this all start? What's going on? I don't understand. And by the way, in furnishing data and information, specifics and documents, and the truth to officials, including the FBI, the U.S. Department of Justice, I'm ignored. Nobody pays any attention to me. I'm not used to that, by the way, particularly as an FBI chief. When I gave an order, people moved. I go back to Washington, D.C., personally meet with people, give them documents. Nobody does anything. Write letters, send certified copies around to U.S. attorneys, FBI, Department of Justice, Attorney General of the United States, never hear from them. I didn't like that. I don't like being ignored, particularly when I'm right. So I researched it, and I was giving this speech one night in Las Vegas about the McDonald case, and I specifically talked about the McDonald case. And the McDonald case, by the way, again, it's a lecture that can take an hour and a half, 2 hours if I go into details, and if I did, it would shock you. I just gave you a little smattering tonight. And after I finished this lecture in Las Vegas on the McDonald case, a man walked up to me, elderly man walked up to me, handed me this book right here, and this is the very book he handed me. And it's called Pawns in the Game. And he said, Ted, the answer to the problem is in this book. Now, I'm telling you that this story here tells it all. It talks about the Illuminati. Is there anybody here who has never heard or does not know anything about the Illuminati? Raise your hand. There's a few. Well, you're going to get a real education tonight, folks. This is a book that was written by William Guy Carr, commander of the Canadian Navy, born in 1895, died in 1959. He basically had the same problem I did. He wanted to know why and what's going on. By the way, I might mention also that this book is available. I sell it through my office, and we have flyers out here. And anything in the way of research that you obtain with my name on it, you're welcome to make copies. I don't worry about copyright. I'm here to educate you folks. I'm here to tell you what's going on, not only in the United States, but also in Canada. We're going to get into that later. But this book is available. This is not mine, so you can't make copies of this if you want to. You know, I don't really care, but I urge you folks to pick up a copy. This is not that expensive. Anyway, Mr. William Guy Carr, same problem I did. What's going on? He couldn't understand it. He couldn't understand why people can't live in peace. We have to have war. We have to have violence. We have to have corruption. So I read this book, and the answer, as I said, is here. Let me just give you a few excerpts from the book. In 1770, Adam Weishaupt, beg your pardon? Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt. Spell it. Weishaupt. Weishaupt, I'll try it. I'll just say Weiss, okay? If I miss it, forget about it. Weishaupt. Is that it? Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt, a Jesuit-trained professor of canon law, who had defected from Christianity and embraced the Luciferian ideology, was retained by the money changers, also known as the House of Rothschild, to revise and modernize the age-old protocols designed to give the Church of Satan ultimate world domination so they could impose the Luciferian ideology upon what remains of the human race. 7 years later, May 1, 1776, Weishaupt, how am I doing on that? Weishaupt, okay. Weishaupt completed his task. The plan required the destruction of all existing governments and religions, and the objective was to be reached by dividing the masses into opposing camps in ever-increasing number on political, racial, social, and economic and other issues. The opposing sides were to be armed, and an incident provided that would cause them to fight and weaken themselves as they destroyed the national governments and religious institutions. He established what is known as the Illuminati. The word Illuminati is derived from Lucifer, and it means holder of the light. In 1776, Weishaupt put a plot into execution, using the lie that his objective was to bring about the one world government, to enable men with proven mental abilities to govern the world. He recruited 2,000 followers. These included the most influential intellectual men in the field of arts and science, education, finance, and industry. He established lodges of the Grand Orient to be their secret headquarters, and he initially set forth 4 basic goals. Later, he provided 25 individual goals. But let me just go and give you the 4 basic goals right in the beginning. Use monetary and sex bribery to obtain control of people already occupying positions in high places in various levels of all governments and other fields of human endeavor. All governments, I emphasize, folks. The number 2 goal was to recruit outstanding students on college campuses and train them to accept the fact that only a one world government can put an end to recurring wars and tribulations. Number 3, those trapped through sex and drugs, i.e. blackmail, and who had been especially trained were to be placed behind the scenes of all governments as advisors and experts so they could influence various adopted policies and serve the secret plans of the one-worlders. Number 4, control the press. Now, going back, in 1773, Meyer Rothschild, who was only 30 years of age at the time, invited 12 other wealthy and influential men to meet him in Frankfurt. His purpose was to convince them to pool their resources and then finance and control the world revolutionary movement and win ultimate control of the wealth, natural resources, and manpower of the entire world. During the meeting, Rothschild read a carefully prepared plan of action. And this plan was prepared by Weishaupt. Number 1, preach liberalism. Number 2, use the idea of freedom to bring about class wars. The book outlines it much more in detail. I'm doing an abbreviated version of it, by the way. Number 3, any and all means were justified to reach their goal. Number 4, their rights lie in force. 5, the power of our resources must remain invisible until the very moment when it has gained such strength that no cunning or force can undermine it. That's what's happened today, folks. You don't know about this, do you? Mainstream media never told you about this. I'm telling you about it. It's exactly what's happened. It remains invisible. And it's not too far away before I think that the one worlders, the globalists, are going to move on us. 6, advocate a mob psychology to obtain control of the masses. 7, use alcohol, drugs, moral corruption, and all forms of vice to systematically corrupt the youth of the nations. That isn't happening now. That's been very well documented. Seize property by any means. Deal with the use of slogans such as equality, liberty, fraternity into the mouths of the masses in psychological warfare. Bill Clinton, if I ever heard of. The next one dealt with war. In 1773, he set down policies that were publicly announced in 1939 by the U.S. and Britain. War should be directed so that nations on both sides be placed further in debt and peace conferences conducted so neither combatants obtained territorial rights. Next, told those present that they must use their wealth to have candidates chosen to public office who would be obedient to their demands and would be used as pawns in the game by the men behind the scenes. The advisors would have been bred, reared, and trained from childhood to rule the affairs of the world. The next one, control the press. Number 13, their agentures will come forward after fomenting traumatic situations and appear as the saviors of the masses when they are actually interested in just the opposite, the killing off of the masses. Next, create industrial depression and financial panics, unemployment, hunger, shortage of food. Use this to control the masses or the mob, and use the mob to wipe out all those who dare to stand in its way. 15, infiltrate into the secret Freemasonry to be used for their purposes. That boils down to a secret society within a secret society, by the way. Not all Freemasons would fall in that category. Next, expound the value of systematic deception. Use high-sounding slogans and phrases and advocate lavish promises to the masses, even though they cannot be kept. Next, the detailed plans for revolution. Discuss the art of street fighting, which is necessary to bring the population to speedy subjection. Next, use their agentures as advisors behind the scene after the wars through secret diplomacy to gain control. Establish huge monopolies toward world government control. Use high taxes and unfair competition to bring about economic ruin by controlling raw materials, organized agitation among the workers, and subsidizing competitors. Build up armaments with police and soldiers sufficient to protect our interests. Members and leaders of the one world government would be appointed by a dictator at the appropriate time. Infiltrate into all classes and levels of society of government for the purpose of fooling, bemusing, and corrupting the youth members of society by teaching them theories and principles that we know to be false. And last, national and international laws should be used to destroy civilization. Now, in 1784, by an act of God, the Bavarian government, in possession of evidence which would prove the existence of the continuing Luciferian conspiracy, Weishaupt, how am I doing, Coach? Conspiracy had been placed into a book form. A copy of the book was sent to a Weishaupt delegate used to foment the French Revolution. The courier was struck by lightning as he rode from Frankfurt to Paris, divine intervention, obviously. The police found the subversive documents on the body and turned it over to the proper government authorities. And after a careful study by the Bavarian government, they raided the newly organized lodges of the Grand Orient and the homes of Weishaupt's most influential associates. Additional evidence was located that documented the Illuminati planned to use wars and revolutions to bring about the establishment of a one world government. The Illuminati went underground, and Weishaupt instructed his Illuminists to infiltrate the lodges of the Blue Masonry and form a secret society within a secret society. A few years later, 1829, the Illuminati held a meeting in New York. It was decided to unite the various groups into an organized group known as communism. Funds were raised to finance Karl Marx and Engels' books, which they wrote, Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto under the direction of one group of Illuminists, and Professor Karl Ritter of Frankfurt University advanced his writings through another group of Illuminists. After Ritter died, a German philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, continued with Ritter's writings, and his philosophy later developed into fascism and Nazism. Did I pronounce that right? Nietzsche's, okay. Thereafter, agent tours of the Illuminati were used to foment World War I and World War II. In 1840, General Albert Pike accepted the idea of a one-world government and ultimately became head of the Luciferian priesthood. Between 1859 and 1871, he worked out the details of a military blueprint for 3 world wars and 3 major revolutions, which he considered would further the conspiracy to its final stage during the 20th century. Can any thinking person deny that the conspiracy revised by Weishaupt in the later 1700s and the plans drawn up by Pike in the later 1800s have matured exactly as intended? The empire of Russia and Germany have been destroyed, those of Britain and France reduced to a third power. The world's population has twice been divided into opposing camps. 2 world wars have seen Christians kill Christians by the millions, and 2 of the major revolutionaries, Russia and China, are accomplished facts. Intrigue now going on in the East and the Middle East is fomenting a 3rd World War. That basically is from Pawns in the Game, documents the problems today, and I want to show you that the Illuminati is alive and well. This is an article that appeared in the Picayune, Mississippi newspaper, January 27, 1997, a year or so ago. A meeting of the mightiest met in Geneva, and as you can see, they are described as Illuminus. Those present included Gingrich, representatives from Great Britain, Rifkin, Netanyahu from Jerusalem, from Israel. We had Bill Gates, businessman there. The Illuminati is alive and well, as I said. This basically shows you that even though the Illuminati was established some 200 and some years ago, we have them still active today. And how does the Illuminati operate, and how they continue to operate through the years? You recall one of the goals was to control the press. This is a document from the U.S. Congressional Record, February 9, 1917. And this document states that the J.P. Morgan interests, right here, gathered 12 men together high up in the newspaper world, employed them to do a survey of 179 newspapers. And out of the 179 newspapers, they picked 25, which they felt if they purchased and placed their editors in place, they could control the press. This is page 2 of the same directory, Congressional Record. You see, page 2948. Well, that's fine. So you control 25 of the leading newspapers. What about all the other problems around the country and the world? This is a book. It's available also through me. It's called Who's Who of the Elite by Robert Galen Ross. And this will tell you how many members and the identity of the members who are in the Bilderbergers, Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, Skull and Bone Society, Committee of 300. What we have here in these groups are the leading politicians, the leading businessmen, the leading dignitaries, the leading bureaucrats in the world who have splintered off from the Illuminati and formed their own groups. These are the people that run the world. These are the people that tell us when we can sell and when we can buy and where we can go and what we can do. And this gives you an indication of how many of them are in the news media and control the news media. We have here Television Broadcasting Network in America, ABC, CNN, CBS, etc. 29. These are not reporters. These are editors high up in the organizational structure. Here we have Time Magazine, magazine publishing. I might also mention commercial banks and federal government, etc. 46 in the publishing business. This is a speech that was given by Rockefeller at a Bilderberger meeting in June 1991. And what he said is, we are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and the world bankers is surely more preferable to the national audio determination practiced in past centuries. That's what they say. Next. This is a speech given by in 1953 by John Swinton, former chief of staff of the New York Times, and I won't go read it for detail, but what it basically says, I'll read the end of it. He talks about the business of journalism is to destroy truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it, even before a group of other editors, by the way. And whatever folly is this toasting an independent press, we are the tools of the vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. This gives you an idea of how the news is slanted, tainted, and how the public can be influenced. This is the Freeman case right across the border in Montana. And you remember that case, and I'm sure there's a lot of publicity on it. They brought an expert in, Associated Press. They brought this expert in and asked him about the case. And he basically talked about the signs of the group leaning more heavily on the racist Christian identity teachings that form the basis of their politics. Right here. And later on he talks about, my light isn't working again, they believe there's a world conspiracy that has signaled them out and the satanic powers will be turned against them down lower. Push that up a little bit, please. Talk about the Christian identity movement holds that white people from Northern Europe are God's children, while Jews are the offspring of Satan and blacks are subhuman mud people. This is typical slanting of the press and the news. Here's another example. This is a rally that was held in Washington, D.C. This is from the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper, August 30, 1996. I attended this rally. I was one of the speakers. It was not an anti-government group. It was a pro-constitutionalist group, and it was a pro-anti-corruption group. This is a story that involves the death of Mr. Rothschild. He died in a hotel room in Paris. Rupert Murdoch, who had 600 media outlets, issued instructions to all those outlets under no circumstances should you say anything other than he died from natural causes or from suicide. Here is an article that appeared in the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and as you can see, the bank heir Rothschild, Amschel Rothschild hangs himself, is what the headlines are. And the truth is, oh, thank you. Throw this away, I think, here. If I can just figure out how to work it. Doesn't work. Setting? I got it. Ah, very good, thank you. The truth is, please say that Amschel was murdered. Here it is right here. He sent hotline fax to 600 editors and news managers around the world ordering them to report his death as a heart attack if at all. Total fabrications, and they get away with it on a regular basis. Your media in Canada isn't any better than ours. I assure you that. Okay, here we go. This is how they control the politicians. Turn it off, Mr. Lincoln, please. In the late 1980s, I received a phone call from Lincoln, Nebraska, that a friend of mine had read my name in a book called The Ultimate Evil, a book by Maury Terry about the Son of Sam murders, New York City. And his name was Ed Weaver, and Ed said, "Are you Ted Gunderson, who went to high school with me and who graduated from the University of Nebraska?" And I said, "Yes, I am. We need your help, come back." I went back to Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska. There had been an arrest made. The police had come out of the house where they made the arrest with extensive pornographic material. There was some publicity in the newspaper in Omaha. A man's picture was shown to the public. 80 children came forward and said that they were part of a pedophile pornographic operation. Of the 80 who came forward, 4 gave statements. 2 later recanted, 2 refused to recant, Paul Benassi and Alicia Owen. Alicia Owen claimed that when she was 14 years old, the chief of police, Bob Wadman, had sex with her on a regular basis. The children named some of the leading businessmen in Omaha, Nebraska, the past publisher of the Omaha World Herald, Harold Anderson, the head of the Nebraska Forestry Service, Eugene Mahoney, the heir of Brandeis Fortune, the editor of the society page of the Omaha World Herald, the chief of police, Bob Wadman. And it was really a shocker. And of course, being as the past publisher of the Omaha World Herald, Harold Anderson was named, let's say, to the least, that the media information was very sketchy and very limited, slanted and tainted. Nevertheless, the information did leak out. And I was asked to help on the investigation. As a result of that investigation, we learned that there was an international child kidnapping ring in the Midwest. Paul Benassi, one of the kids who was talking, gave me a statement and stated that he was used as a decoy in parks and malls and public places to bring the children over near the car where the adults were located. Thereafter, the adults would grab the kids and make off with them. The kids would end up being auctioned off in 2 places, Toronto, Canada, and Las Vegas, Nevada. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 10, 11-year-old child, male or female, will sell for $50,000. Paul told me that these kids were placed on airplanes in some instances, placed in campers. The ones that were placed in airplanes, the planes took off. There were foreigners with foreign accents, turbans, and there were police officers there. And he said that the children, he felt, were being used as sex slaves in some instances, for body parts in other instances, satanic ritual human sacrifices in other instances. And I wrote a letter to the FBI, to the U.S. Department of Justice, Attorney General William Barr, wrote a letter to the governor of the state of Nebraska, to the Attorney General of the state of Nebraska, and I said, don't believe me, I'm only former head of the FBI in Southern California. Contact me, I'll give you my sources. You do your own investigation. I received 2 responses of the 4 letters. One, your sources are not credible. They didn't even know who my sources were, by the way. Number 2, you do not have adequate documentation. I immediately furnished 12-page adequate documentation and never heard back from them. By the way, this report and details concerning this case are available on the missing children flyer that you see, on a book that you see on my flyer. In addition to this, Paul told me that children were being taken out of orphanages and private homes and foster homes, by the way, and driven from Omaha to Sioux City, Iowa, 184 miles, placed in private jets, flown to Washington, D.C., for sex orgy parties with congressmen, senators, dignitaries, bureaucrats, ambassadors, etc., etc., etc. Now, the man who was behind this was a fellow named Larry King, not Larry King Live, but a black man who was a rising star in the Republican Party. He had a salary at the Franklin Savings and Loan. By the way, this Franklin Savings and Loan was set up to help minorities be provided with banking opportunities. He had a salary there of $17,000. He rented a condominium on Embassy Row in Washington, D.C. for $5,000 a month. This is where the parties took place. In talking to Paul Benassi and him furnishing me information as to who attended these parties, sex orgy parties, children, 10, 11, 12 years old primarily, it reads like who's who in American politics. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. There's a book out on this called The Franklin Cover-Up. Again, it's also available through my flyer and research. But I'm going to give you, right now, the documentation on the blackmailing of politicians. These kids, not only here in the United States, not there in the United States, but I'm sure here, because of the Toronto connection, the same thing is taking place in Canada. I'm positive. I know it is. This is an article from the Washington Times, Wednesday, July 5, 1989. Top Japanese politician linked to Spence. Craig Spence was a CIA agent who was used to set up these top politicians and bureaucrats. Once his identity was discovered, and you see it is discovered here, was discovered here, he was found in the trunk of an automobile some 6 months later. Dead men don't talk. Another article, Washington Times, June 30, 1989, drug power served drugs, sex at parties, bug for blackmail. Talk about child prostitution in the White House. Craig Spence again. Another article, homosexual prostitution probe that snarls officials of Bush and Reagan. Callboys took midnight tour of White House. Now, this is the Washington Times. This is not considered a mainstream media source. This is not the Washington Post. Paul Benassi knew Craig Spence, and Paul Benassi has drawn the inside of the White House, the living quarters of the White House, which gives him credibility. That area is not visited by the general public. This is one of the techniques and one of the goals of the Illuminati, which I mentioned to you just a few moments ago. Turn it off now. Now let me give you. Oops, I think I broke it. I hate these things anyway, to be honest with you. I probably have a loud enough voice. I don't need this, do I, in the back? Or I don't know, maybe I do need it? Okay. Okay, listen. I want to tell you about an intelligence meeting that took place at the White House December the 5th and the 6th of 1980. It was attended by top CIA officials, Bill Casey, he was head of the CIA at the time, and top White House officials, including then Vice President George Bush. And they issued a white paper. And what they decided was, rather than have war or peace, there's a third option. We could have turmoil covert operations, domestic unrest throughout the world. And Bush authored an executive order 12333. Now, executive orders are unconstitutional. Executive orders were originally designed to furnish direction, executive orders to departmental heads within the federal government. But our presidents, for years now, have used them for other purposes. Executive orders to the people, that gives them dictatorial powers, by the way. And Executive Order 12333 allowed the CIA to contract out covert operations to outsiders, other than people that are within the government itself. And in December 1981, President Reagan signed it. Now, in 1981-82, the CIA moved people to the Pentagon to avoid congressional oversight. And among other activity, they infiltrated the National Guard. Bush sent a policy memo to all federal agencies involved in the intelligence field, and he assigned an individual to each agency, gave him the title of Special Compartmentalized Intelligence Agent, with instructions that if an agent in the field learns of large caches or large-scale drug or arms operation, he is not to investigate it, but rather furnish information back to this compartmentalized intelligence agent, and the matter would be handled in Washington, D.C. And the instructions were issued with the stipulation that if a field agent refused to comply with these instructions, he would be dismissed from employment and prosecuted. This is in force today, and this is a matter, of course, that allows and provides the White House and our government with almost unlimited power in investigating caches of arms and drugs. Now, why would they do that? Well, I can tell you why they did it. Because the CIA is the biggest drug dealer in the world. The CIA has been bringing drugs into this country for years, going back to the Vietnam War and prior to that. Air America, CIA operation. Southern Air, more recently known instead of Air America because of the publicity about Air America, are examples. In Mena, Arkansas, when Bill Clinton was governor, the CIA were bringing drugs into Mena, arms and munitions out. This is better known as Iran-Contra. And Iran-Contra was real. Ollie North, many people consider him an American hero. He was involved in it. I have a number of CIA friends, primarily, who were also involved in it. And when we had the drug hearings in Washington, D.C., a year ago last fall, over whether or not the CIA were bringing drugs into south central Los Angeles to the black areas, our inspector, we call him Magic Bullet Arlen Specter, because he claimed on the Kennedy assassination the bullet went at 90-degree angles about 4 times before it settled in John Conway's body. That's right, the Magic Bullet. Anyway, Arlen Specter was in charge, his committee, and they brought nebulous witnesses, in that they had no direct knowledge of any drug operations. I personally sent the Specter Committee the names of 16 individuals who had first-hand knowledge of CIA drug operations, bringing drugs into this country. Now, one of those individuals was called and asked to testify. So, that's the way that the government is now controlling the situation, and has been for some time. We talked briefly about Bill Clinton. I mentioned his name. Bill Clinton is an unbelievable, as my friend Bill Well calls him, I guess you call him a dirtbag, wouldn't you, Bill?
Yeah,
anything along those lines. The man absolutely deserves no respect. When he was governor of Arkansas, he established the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, which was a state agency designed to furnish loans to schools, churches, and students. Instead, it was used to launder drug money coming out of the Mena, Arkansas operation. And the money was then used and transferred to BCCI Bank of Credit and Commerce International in Florida, in Atlanta, Georgia, Rostenkowski, U.S. Representative Rostenkowski's bank in Chicago. And you had a BCCI bank, I believe it was Toronto at the time. By the way, these banks all failed in 1991 when they were exposed for their drug laundering activity. But Bill Clinton, just to give you a rundown, he said he's a Rhodes Scholar. He never finished. He went to Moscow during the Cold War. He organized and participated in anti-American rallies in London, England, during the Vietnam War. As governor, he said he balanced the budget 11 times. He never balanced the budget once. He said he didn't raise taxes. He raised them 126 times. Former Congressman Dennemeyer, California, has the best one-sentence description of Bill Clinton I can think of. Describes him as a draft-dodging, womanizing, pathological liar who should be impeached. Now, I don't know if you're aware of the survey that was recently conducted in the United States. They asked the American women if they'd go to bed with Bill Clinton. Half of them said no, the other half said never again. And I don't know if you're aware of why he wears boxer shorts. To keep his ankles warm. Okay, turn on the machine there, Bill. Okay, we mentioned Bill Clinton. This is some of the power that Bill Clinton has right today. These are executive orders. I mentioned executive orders, unconstitutional. But Bill Clinton, right today, if he wanted to, declare martial law, take over all means of communication, electric power, petroleum, gas, fuel, minerals, all food resources, farms, transportation, seaports, highways, workforces, health, welfare, educational functions, and airports, aircraft, railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. That's the power Bill Clinton, as President of the United States, has today. Let's compare that with the Communist Manifesto. Communist Manifesto: abolition of private property, heavy progressive income tax, abolition of all rights of inheritance, confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels, central bank, government control of communication and transportation, government ownership of factories and agricultural, government control of labor, corporate farms, regional planning, government control of education. George Bush. I can tell you a few things about George Bush. I can't give you any sex stories about him. I could, but I wouldn't dare. His stories about his sex life are worse than Bill Clinton's, I'll tell you right now. Let's talk about George Bush. He was our president, a Republican. By the way, there's not a, people used to say there's not a dime worth of difference between a Republican and a Democrat, but with the inflation and spending, there's not $1 trillion worth of difference between a Republican and a Democrat. But prior to leaving office, George Bush signed a treaty, and this treaty was not ratified by Congress, and if it's not ratified, it automatically becomes law in 90 days in the United States. This treaty allowed foreign troops to come in and operate in America. Friends have seen troops by the thousands in the United States, foreign troops, that is. They call them United Nations peacekeepers, peacekeeping troops. You folks think you're exempt from that? I'm sorry to say you're not. Let me just read an intelligence report that I received recently. And this is only the beginning. Presently, Russian and Chinese New World Order forces are working rapidly in Canada with the full blessing of the Canadian government to prepare for their troops to enter into America under martial law across the Canadian border. Now what they're talking about here is that when the President of the United States declares martial law, that the Russian and Chinese troops will be used to come in and invade America from the north. In anticipation of Russian and Chinese New World Order forces coming over the border from Canada to help subdue the American resistors under martial law, interstate interstate highways such as I-90, which would carry traffic from the Peace Bridge of Niagara Falls from Canada into America, have been reinforced and hardened, especially at and on off ramps, to support heavier weight military transportation vehicles. I have personally observed this while traveling thousands of miles across America and Canada. We have a pretty good network of people, by the way, on both sides of the border. Russia has promised Canada that in exchange for their cooperation in this, once America is successfully seized by the New World Order, they will give Canada the states of Washington, Oregon, Montana, and Idaho. And this report goes on. According to sources obtained, the Russian nuclear submarines are presently based off the coast of Washington State. Russian stealth helicopters have also been observed practicing takeoffs and landings on the coast as well. Currently, thousands of Russian intelligence agents are known to be located in both Washington State and British Columbia, as well as Alaska, and in southern Mexico. Multitudes of Russian and other foreign New World Order forces are stationed with military hardware, waiting for what's that given cue from this administration to come up and help subdue America under martial law. One military chaplain reported recently that 2 Indian villages in Durango were destroyed by these forces during mock invasion exercise, killing the inhabitants. It talks about Russian troops and German troops who are now assigned to Holloman Air Force Base in southern New Mexico. Our people have talked to the German troops there and been told that when martial law is declared, that the German troops will be used, the Air Force, German Air Force, to strafe the streets of America. Now the game plan, again, according to our sources, is right today and in the past several years, the CIA has been furnishing the Crips and the Bloods and the street gangs with munitions and arms extensively. And the street gangs will eliminate the police. After that, the New World Order forces will eliminate the street gangs, because after the police are eliminated, the street gangs can come after us, you and I, and our homes. And then the New World Order forces will take over. The president will use the incident to declare martial law at the proper time. Here's a couple of other little items that I want to mention to you. Oh, by the way, this is an article from the Dallas Morning News, July 1, 1997. Clinton administration planning to send U.S. troops to Africa. Our troops are presently in over 100 countries. U.S. troops are in over 100 countries around the world. And we have thousands of Russian, as I said, troops in our country. Here's a couple of items I'd like to mention to you. Oh, by the way, let's go through these flyers. Yeah, keep going. This is a Spotlight. It's a magazine out of Washington, D.C. This was February 27, 1995. Reno wants a national hit team that could operate anywhere in the United States, talking about rapid deployment, strike force within the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and 2,500 personnel, would include military personnel. And this is against our Constitution. There's a law that was passed right after the Civil War that military personnel will not be used against civilians in the United States. The Marines attacked New Orleans and Mobile. Our U.S. Marines and troops have been involved in joint venture operations with the civilian law enforcement in going through villages and towns in mock attacks. Now, your forces in Canada are presently being trained, your armed forces are presently being trained by RCMP in the art of urban warfare, going from house to house and knocking the door down, taking people into custody, and killing people and taking over their property. This is one removed from the military. This is a military man told his father who told me, Canadian Armed Forces. Joint military operation is confirmed not through the mainstream media, but a Russian general on television in Moscow confirmed it. In the United States, we talked about mock attacks on cities. There were 21 cities, and finally, the last one was Charlotte, North Carolina. So there were so many complaints that they discontinued it. Now they're building a mock village in Utah, $200 million. And I have intelligence information they're also building a mock village in Canada for the same purpose. What's going to happen to us, folks? Well, we'll probably end up in slave labor camps. Well, as a matter of fact, this memo says that that's what's going to happen to us. This is a memorandum, Department of the Army, and 1994, draft Army regulation on civilian inmate labor program. It tells about the policy. This is just the cover sheet, by the way. I have the details, but it's too involved to show you tonight because we have so many other topics I want to discuss. And I want to particularly discuss the children and the problem with the children in Canada and the United States, which we'll go into probably the second session after the break. But this talks about what's going to happen to us and the procedure that's going to be followed. Now, when the New World Order forces take over, we see here that certain states in the United States will have troops from certain countries. Texas will have Czechoslovakian troops. California will have troops from the Ukraine. I wish I could give you an update on Canada. I don't know what Canada's going to have. But since I'm living in Nevada, I don't see Nevada on there, but I do spend, oh, here's Nevada right there. That's Utah. I do spend a lot of time in California, so I guess I'm going to have to learn how to speak the Ukraine language. Here's an article. It tells us a little bit about how our constitutional rights are being deteriorated on a regular basis. This is again the Spotlight, which is not a mainstream publication, but what we call an alternative source of the news. And this is a bill that was passed, H.R. 666. That's how brazen they are. Passed by our U.S. Congress that takes away the necessity of having a search warrant to search your property. This is a survey that was conducted 29 Palms, a Marine base, California, and there was, I think, 150 questions. One of the questions asked of the Marines, would you shoot a fellow American if you asked him for his gun and he refused to turn the gun over to you? 25% of the Marines said they would, 75% said they would not. And the Marines that have said that they would are being promoted, the others are being relegated elsewhere. I made so much of an issue out of this that I received a call one day from a colonel. Hold on just a minute. No. I received a call one day from a colonel at the Marine base, and he said, Mr. Gunderson, I want you to know that that was a survey that I conducted, asked of the Marines, 150 some questions, legitimate survey in connection with my master's degree where I'm going to school. And I said, yes, Colonel, I believe that. Of course I believe that. He said it had nothing to do with a survey in connection with whether the Marines would shoot or wouldn't shoot a fellow American. I don't believe that in a million years. But at least I got his attention. Gorbachev and Bush and others had a meeting September 27th, October 1st. Elitists met at the conference in San Francisco to discuss the New World Order and who will be governed there. And those present included, let's see, Margaret Thatcher was there, and George Bush. The others included Ted Turner, CNN, George Shultz, former Secretary of the State, President of the Soviet Breakaway Republic, Turkey, Czech Republic, and so on and so forth. Bilderberger were there, ex-Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and it goes on down, as you can see. 8,000 business leaders were there from 75 countries. By the way, Gorbachev is living the life of Riley, actually the life of a king. He's over here in the United States touring this country, makes $10,000 a speech, and they have given him, turned over the Presidio, which is a plush Army base in the San Francisco area, in the San Francisco Bay, as a matter of fact. They've given him the Presidio facilities for him to live on and live. This is something I don't understand. I don't know what's going on here, but I thought it'd be of interest to you. It's an article that appeared in the New York Magazine, and I don't have the date shown, obviously, but anyway, this is about 2 years old. Every day, the Russian mob receives a shipment of up to $1 billion in fresh $100 bills. The money is flown out of JFK, comes straight to from the United States Federal Reserve, and this is an exclusive investigation. And by the way, this Friedman, the author, I've tried to reach him, and he's disappeared on us. I don't know what happened to it. The date, I can't see the date right offhand.
They put him in with the money.
Yeah, maybe he went to Russia. Maybe he got his 10%. But I don't understand that one. I mean, I don't have an explanation for that. But the Federal Reserve, I might mention this, the money came out of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is not a government agency, it's a private corporation. And it's a privately held stock. And you know, we pay income tax to the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, every year. Excuse me, the money we pay to the IRS goes to the Federal Reserve. It does not go toward paying off the national debt in America. It goes toward paying the interest on the national debt in America. And the Federal Reserve is part of the International Monetary Fund, World Monetary Fund, which includes banks in the Warburg Bank in Germany, Kudlow Bank, London, Rome, Italy, and New York, Chase Manhattan Bank. These are the big boys. These are the boys, the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, we're talking about POWs now. This is another area that I'm not real sure about, in that I don't quite understand it, but I think I do at the same time, but I don't have the documentation. We left behind in World War II 35 to 50,000 GIs in Russia. We've never made an attempt to get them back. In the Korean War, 83 to 8,400 GIs were left behind. Never made an attempt to get them back. Vietnam War, Southeast Asia, around 2,500. Never made an attempt to get them back. In fact, our government says they are no longer alive, do not exist. They do. We have absolute documentation that they have lived in recent years. And I have information from my inside sources at the CIA that the CIA sent a hit team into Southeast Asia to eliminate them, to ensure that they would not be identified and later made to embarrass U.S. politicians. Why are they doing this? I can only say that it's probably because the New World Order wants to reduce the world population to 500 million. The population in the United States would be 20 million. The population in Canada would be 3 million. You're what, 29 million now? 30 million? And because they want to make sure that their elite have enough food so that they can live for years and years and years. And also, I might mention also that in America, I can't say this is happening in Canada, because ever since I've been here it's been cloudy and I can't see up beyond the clouds. But in America, but I love it here, by the way. I'm really impressed with Canada. I love the people. I'm really impressed with your teenagers. They're so nice and neat. Ours wear baggy pants, running around smoking dope, and it's unreal. But in America, there are what we call contrails. And I have a radio talk show. By the way, you can probably pick me up if you have a satellite. In fact, I know you can. Some Canadians are listening to me. It's on the back of the flyer that was passed out to you. I'm on a satellite. It's Transponder 1 Galaxy and so on and so forth. Anyway, I'm receiving reports from all over the country, New York, Los Angeles, North Dakota, Colorado, Wyoming, Louisiana, Virginia, Nevada, that jets flying very high altitude are leaving contrails. This is condensation trails from jets. A normal contrail will dissipate in probably a short period of time. These contrails last for probably an hour or an hour and a half, and they end up expanding, becoming a larger cloud and larger cloud. There's a fellow in Wyoming who called in on my show and claimed that these are ethyl dibromide, which is a chemical that was banned in the United States in 1983, and it's a form of poison, of course. But the New World Order doesn't want us to live, folks. If you're 40 years of age or over, and most of us in this room are, as I look around, we're not productive enough for them. And so I think many of us will be eliminated. And you know, the people that they're using against us, like the satanic movement, we're going to get into the satanic movement a little later on. The Satanists and the CIAs and the corrupt law enforcement officers, the people they're using against us, they're expendable too. What they don't realize is they're going to use them, and then they're not going to be around either. And I'm sure that there's some of you in the audience here, and you're going to go down with the rest of us. You're not going to make it either, if they have anything to say about it. There's some of us that will make it, and I think many of us will. Anyway, this is a story about the POWs. Reported that they were left behind in North Korea. Well, actually, it's 83, 84. That's the next.
You want to go hold on?
No, hold those. Okay, let me just touch base on a couple of items here, and we'll take a little break. I think. Let's see. We've been going about an hour. I'm going to come forth with a few little items. H.R. 1617 is a bill that was passed by Congress, and parents will have to collaborate with the government to raise their children. There'll be certain regulations and restrictions. We're going to talk more about children, by the way. We're going to spend a lot of time on children in the next session. On October 28, 1998, the government will have the capability to tap all telephones in the United States. In 1999, a national ID card, before you can hire or be hired an individual, you'll have to check with Washington, D.C. and see if Washington, D.C. will approve of it. It's called a national ID card, like a driver's license. And we also have in America, and I know you have it up here, what we call outcome-based education. That's the United Nations courses that are advocated by our Department of Education. Outcome-based education is this. There are 3 levels of intelligence: the highest, the middle, and the lowest. And the schools are instructed to teach all the students at the lowest level. We talked a little bit earlier about camps. I've talked to an ex-con in the United States who told me that prisoners, federal prisoners, nonviolent, have for the last several years been working on converting a military bases to internment camps. They're paying them $5.50 a day. Also, we have a federal execution center in the United States in Terre Haute, Indiana. It's a new one. Houses 50 individuals. We haven't had a federal execution since 1963. Our prisons, we've built over 200 new prisons in the United States in recent years. The former civilian head of the prison system in the state of Texas, I was visiting with him on one occasion about 9 months ago. Asked him about the prison system in Texas. He said there are 8 brand new prisons in Texas that are staffed, but there's no inmates in the facility. So they're staffed with no inmates there. So our military bases are being converted, federal execution center. We have underground cities in the United States. Our sources in Montana talk about huge caves that are housing huge Russian helicopters. There are sources that have told us about underground cities that are being built and have been built in America, specifically Kansas City and Las Vegas. There is a new machine, a laser machine, that goes at the rate of 10 miles an hour that goes through solid, hard rock. And we have been told that there is a tunnel that goes, a highway tunnel that goes from the East Coast to the West Coast. In Alaska, we have the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, it's otherwise known as HARP, and it can jam global communications. It can disrupt human mental processes. It can change weather patterns, and it unnaturally impacts upon the Earth's atmosphere. And this is the shocker, folks. If you own a car that's been built in the last 6 years, they can push a button and your car stops in place. You don't go any place. There's a computer chip in the electric system. I own a 1987 automobile now, by the way. I just bought one. But I don't think it's going to do me good on the freeways of Los Angeles, because everybody else will be sitting there stacked up. I think the thing to do is buy a motorcycle. We talked about military operations with Russia. We talked about slave labor, 666. I'm going through my notes. I got a little ahead of myself. POWs. Here's something else that I think is of interest to you. The Chinese family Rayati contributed several $100,000 to the Bill Clinton campaign in exchange for Clinton designating the 1.7 million acres in Utah and Arizona as federal property. What happened there is that Clinton, with the swipe of the pen, took the 1.7 acres away from private held property, people holding private property, the businesses and so forth, told them to get off, they're through. And as a result, we lost a valuable source of coal, and now that coal, the Lippo Group has been organized in China by the Rayati family, and that coal is being imported in the United States through former Senator Dianne Feinstein's husband, Mr. Blum. Typical politics. 9 million acres in California, 47 of the 98 parks, national parks in the United States, under the control of the United Nations. We think this is where many of the foreign troops are being held. We have a mass seizure of farms through the IRS in the United States. And one area that is of interest to not only us but also to you is the MK Ultra program. MK Ultra is a CIA mind control program that's been active for years. After World War II, German scientists, instead of going to Russia, many of them came over to the Northern Hemisphere. They were divided between Canada and the United States, and they continued their experiments involving genocide, and this included mind control programs, Manchurian Candidate, etc., etc. Now you recall back in the 50s when many of you Canadian citizens were used as guinea pigs on the LSD experiments. That was part of it. It was only until years later that you learned about it through various means. Americans were also victims of that LSD experiment program. People entered the hospital in Rochester, New York for minor operations and were experimented on by the U.S. government unknown to them. What is the MK Ultra program? How does it occur and what happens? It's a combination, by the way, the CIA is they're masters at this. I think they picked it up from the Germans and developed it further. But it is administered through a shock treatment, hypnosis, drugs, and torture. And the human mind has a defense device that will split. And if it's a traumatic experience, you won't remember it. Now, you remember Princess Margaret, her driver, can't remember what happened. That's typical of what would happen to the mind. And the CIA has been using it for years. They train individuals to be assassins, and they can pick up the phone and call that individual and say green, blue, red, whatever the signal is, the target word, the trigger word, and he automatically has a target. He snaps into one of his personalities and goes out and eliminates Mr. XYZ. And then he's programmed to commit suicide, usually. So there's no evidence. In the second session, we are going to talk a little about the taking away of guns and some of these mass murders that have occurred. And I personally feel, although I cannot prove it, that these are the result of MK-Ultra mind control programs. There's another area that is of grave concern to me, and I'm sure it's of grave concern to you, and that involves the children that are being taken out of the homes in Canada and the United States. Most recently, I had a series of cases where the children are taken from the mother and the father, or the mother or the father, and oftentimes where there's a divorce, given over to the perpetrator, where there's allegations of sexual exploitation on the part of the child. And the Child Protective Services refuses to protect the child. The courts refuse to protect the child. And eventually the child is put up for adoption and disappears into the system. In the United States, each child is taken out of the home. The county is given $24,000 per year. In my county alone, Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada, there were 22,860 some children taken out of the homes last year. This adds up to $68 million that the federal government gave to the county, Clark County. And special care children, where they have a health problem, etc., the state or the county can get up to $250,000 per year. And in order to sustain the system in the United States, it's necessary for 3,000 children per day to be taken away from the families. And I might mention that in many instances, as I said earlier, the children are being sexually abused. The courts don't protect the child, and the child slips into the system, in some instances never to be heard again. There's a book out written by Robert W. Nicholson. You want to stand up, Bob? Rob? There's Rob. Fantastic book. It talks about what's going on in British Columbia and right here in your own community. And this book is entitled Stolen Innocence. It talks about the child problem, pornography, pedophilia, Satanism. Let me just thumb through here and read a couple of items from the book itself. This talks about, this is on page 27, it talks about in 1995, British Columbia's Minister of Social Services was subjected to the scrutiny of a judicial inquiry. The inquiry was headed by the Honorable Judge Thomas Grove and was initiated by the tragic events surrounding the life and death of a 5-year-old young man named Matthew John Vadrul, I guess it is. The primary purpose of the inquiry was to investigate the competency and efficiency of the child protection services available to the children of the province. And what did the judge say? Judge Grove was quoted as saying, "There are many children in BC who are not being protected. There are many children who are suffering from abuse and are being neglected. The Child Protective Service, which is designed to protect these children, is having considerable difficulty in doing that, and in fact isn't doing it. There doesn't appear to be any organized way in which the ministry learns of these deaths." A former ministry social worker, now in private practice, supported the opinion of an individual named Carrie Simpson when she stated to the writer, quote, "How is anything ever going to change when all the government primarily did was allow the same people to remain in their same positions and simply change the name of the agency? All hell broke loose with the Canadian Airborne Regiment over the killing of Somalia. I can't understand why our government doesn't have the same concerns for the hundreds of Canadian children that are abused and murdered right here in Canada every year." During 1994, 33 children involved with the Ministry of Social Services died. Between November 1995 and July 1996, another 49 children involved with the Ministry of Social Services died. Of the latter children, 14 were in direct care of the ministry. The ministry was aware of complaints of abuse and neglect involving the other 35 children. 4 of the deaths are suspected or alleged homicide cases, with another 4 being classified as undetermined. Let me also read a little bit from chapter 4 on pedophilia, a big problem, not only here but also in the United States. The number of children maltreated in Canada on an annual basis would be 102,994, broken down into categories using the same formula. The calculation identifies the following figures and corresponding comparative figures that are suspected to be closer to reality. National case of neglect annually, 44,223. Suspected, 88,446. National cases of physical abuse annually, 25,870. Suspected, 51,740. National cases of sexual abuse annually, 17,434. Suspected, 34,868. Some more figures which I think you will find interesting. Page 79. By the way, this book is available at the table. And be sure to take a look at it. How many do you have over there? A few that are available? Rob? Just a few, okay. This is a story about the judicial corruption. Judicial corruption is no longer simply an unconfirmed suspicion. It is considered to be a publicly recorded fact. In 1995, the Providence newspaper published a story which fairly clearly stated that an unidentified member of an organized crime syndicate had disclosed the fact that crime syndicates do have control over several judges in British Columbia, in fact, that the authorities appear to have concealed from the public for the same time. So, you have the same problem here as we have in America. And in closing this, before we take a break and then we'll come back, we'll talk about Satanism, talk more about international trafficking in children, involving children in Canada also. Let me just mention that we have a presidential directive, and it's Presidential Directive 25. And in the event of a crisis, the President of the United States has the power to pass this power on to, or the authority to pass the power on to, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Scary, isn't it? In closing on this first half of the lecture, let me mention this also. An article which I picked up in the United States on Canada before I left. Let me read from this article. It says here, the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, MAI, means a world without borders. We're talking about Canada now, ruled by a virtual dictatorship of the world's most powerful central bankers, commercial banks, and multinational corporations. The article goes on and says it's a world where small countries like Canada don't count for even less, and where citizens as voters would count for nothing at all because it wouldn't matter who got elected. Any government would be almost powerless to affect and improve our destiny. The world is an absolute certainty if we sit on our hands and do nothing. For those who find the prospect frightening and totally unacceptable, concerted action is required soon, very soon. It may be too late. Are any of you who are not familiar with this multilateral agreement on investments? You're all familiar with it. Understand it's already passed, is that right?
No,
It hadn't passed?
No,
In July? Well, I hope you're able to defeat it. By the way, folks, those of us who are involved in these issues, we closed in the first session, or the first part of the lecture, and those of us who are involved have difficulty paying the bills. My full retirement goes to my radio show and to research and to stay abreast of what's going on in these various fields. And there is a home-based business if you're interested. that is helping me financially. And if you're interested, I'll give you the number. Give it a call and inquire into it, because the economics are such now and in the future that it's going to be more difficult to pay your bills, and I know that. So dial 1-760-730-3033 if you're interested in a home-based business. You can operate this right out of your home. I'll repeat that. 1-760-730-3033. Second half, we will talk about international trafficking of children. We'll talk some more about Child Protective Services. We'll talk about satanic cults. We'll talk about preschools, which are designed all over the world for the satanic cults to get their hands on our 2, 3, and 4-year-old children to indoctrinate them into Satanism. I personally worked in McMartin preschool case in Manhattan Beach, California. I have slides from that case. I have slides from an abandoned satanic site, which I think you'll find very interesting. So let's take a break and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Do you have a website?
Website's on the back sheet of the paper that you have. I'm not talking about this water, but it reminded me of the fact that, I don't know about this, is the best water I've had in a long time is in Canada, by the way. But in the United States, they're putting fluoride in all our water. Fluoride is something they use on rats to make them docile. And in addition to that, the contrails, which I mentioned, are going across the country, and if it's ethyl dibromide, that's a poison. And every time we turn around, we have the government coming after us. It's a question of what are we going to do in the future? Well, I think right now we have to educate ourselves, educate each other. But in discussing the drug situation, in the 1950s there were experiments, as I mentioned, on citizens, Canadian citizens and Americans. But, and also I've been told since I've entered the Kootenai Valley in the 1980s during the Cold War with Russia and the United States, that there were experiments on the heavy population of Japanese and Russians there, because they figured that, who cares about the Japanese and the Russian? And that came from a good, credible source. On the break also, I was talking to some gentlemen, and we mentioned the Desert Storm. And I didn't have it scheduled on the lecture, but I can tell you a little bit about the Desert Storm and reduction of the population. Fits hand in glove with that. There were 28 nations that went to war, and of the 28, 27 inoculated their soldiers. The only nation that did not inoculate the soldiers was France. And by the way, the Canadian troops and the American troops were both inoculated. I don't know the report from Canada, but in America there were over 700,000 GIs. And right today, 4/5 of them have been washed out of the service because they can't even do a push-up. And they're being replaced by the new U.S. Army. So we got rid of the U.S. government got rid of some really well-seasoned, solid soldiers. And they came back, and their children were born deformed, their wives obtained this disease, whatever it is. And the story that we have, based on documentation from a nurse, Joyce Riley, is that they poisoned our boys, and they poisoned the other boys. That would include the Canadians too, by the way. And we have over 15,000 deaths that we know of from Desert Storm. So it goes on and on and on. The second half, I'd like to start out with Satanism. Satanism is a very important part of the operation by the New World Order. As you recall, I talked about Lucifer and the Illuminati. Well, they have used the satanic movement to further their cause all along. And as a result of my involvement in the McDonald case, In my research thereafter, there are more than 3 million practicing Satanists in America. That comes from 3 sources. A source in confidential source in South Bay, Los Angeles, 200,000 population, says there's 3,000 there. Lincoln, Nebraska, population 200,000. Another source, 3,000 there. Iowa City, Iowa, a third source, 100,000 people in Iowa City, Iowa, 1,500 there. So if you project those figures, it's 3.75 million Americans are actively involved in the cults. And those are sources, those 3 sources are people that who themselves were actively involved. Now, I want to also mention that 3 separate sources have informed me that there are between 50 and 60,000 human sacrifices every year by the cults in the United States. I believe that. Death or murder for these people is like you and I having a drink of water. And there's some interesting background in connection with that. There are certain leaders in America who have been active for years. One is Michael Aquino, more generally referred to as Mike by a friend of mine. And the other is Anton LaVey. Michael Aquino and Anton LaVey were involved together in the Church of Satan in the Bay Area. They both had tremendous egos. Actually, Anton LaVey had an ego because he died recently. But Aquino split and established the Temple of Set and 2 separate groups. Anton LaVey passed away, died October 29th of last year. That would have been a great honor to him to die on a satanic holiday, which he did. Michael Aquino is still alive and kicking. Michael Aquino was walking through the Presidio one day, and a young boy says to his mama, "Mommy, that's the man that molested me at the preschool." And so the mother reported Aquino. There was an 18-month investigation by the Department of the Army, and of course nothing came of that. In the meantime, Aquino was transferred from the Presidio area, I mentioned Gorbachev's there now, they closed it down, to St. Louis, where he was placed in charge of the personnel files for the U.S. Army Reserve. And in the meantime, after the investigation cleared, Aquino came back to the Bay Area, continued with his Temple of Set activity, and about a year and a half ago, I heard that he had been actively involved at the University of Arizona in a confidential operation, mind control program that was classified on behalf of the U.S. government. So Michael Aquino continues his nasty, dirty work. He's appeared on Geraldo. I don't know if you recall the TV show about the late 1980s where Geraldo did a special on Satanism. It was the highest rated TV documentary in the history of television. But did Geraldo ever catch hell afterwards? And as a result, of course, Geraldo has discontinued doing any shows on satanic cult type activity. I appeared on that show. Aquino was on that show. Zin LaVey was on that show. Father Labar, a Catholic priest on the East Coast who specializes in helping Catholics who are victims of the satanic movement, ritual abuse, etc., was on the show. There was so much pressure and they made such a fool, they thought they made a fool out of Geraldo that he, as I said, he discontinued any shows of that type again after that. But that's what happens when you try to expose these people. They come after you with all their forces. And the mainstream media is certainly one of the strongest forces that they use to discredit you, to embarrass you, whatever means that they can to ensure that you're not an effective person when you take on this element in our society. I mentioned earlier about when I came out with the McDonald case and furnished a 1,200 page report, and then I started receiving information that I was homosexual, suffering from mental problems, trafficking drugs. Yeah, I probably am suffering from mental problems. I wouldn't get involved in these things. But anyway, this came back to me, and then they tried to, as I said, they tried to set me up on a fraud case in Dallas, and put a girl on me to try to get me on a drug case. And they have not had much success in that regard. They've made several attempts on my life. I've had 3 times that gunmen were waiting for me through divine intervention. I did not go where I was supposed to go on that particular occasion, those particular occasions. I've had 3 other occasions when there have been accidents that were obviously the result of their dirty work. The last was in '93 when the lug nuts on the car I was driving between Lincoln and Omaha, Nebraska came off, and well, the lug nuts were loosened actually. The wheel came off, and I was doing 75 miles an hour down the freeway, and the wheel, all of a sudden the front of the car goes like this, and I look over, and here about 15 feet in the air is the right front wheel spinning up into the air. Anyway, I was able to control the car, no problem. The CIA have all kinds of means that they use, devices they use to kill people. They are specialists at assassinations. One of the most popular is a chemical that they use to induce a heart attack that's non-traceable. Just the last day or so, McDougal, who was the mouthpiece and getting ready to talk on the Whitewater case in Arkansas, the real estate escapade on the part of the Clintons, in jail, died of a heart attack. Not surprising. I've talked to a number of my CIA friends who told me about professional assassins and killings and murders that they've been involved in. And one of them in particular, Chip Tatum, who's gone public, by the way. Chip dropped out when they asked him to take direct action against a fellow American. He said, I'll do it against a foreigner, but I won't do it against a fellow American. And he was in a meeting, a Bilderberg meeting, as a matter of fact, according to Chip. Let's see, George Bush was there. Mr. Peepers, head of the CIA at the time, Bill Colby. Henry Kissinger was there. And they were discussing the future. And Chip was being given an assignment to go after Ross Perot during the election that we had here 6 years ago. And to do so, he had to go after, fake, I don't know the details, but it involved his daughter. And you recall somebody did come out and threaten his daughter. He dropped off and then backed out of the election, then came forward. He was taking a number of votes away from George Bush. Anyway, Chip Tatum said, I've had enough. And he had been collecting mementos, I'll put it, for a number of years, including the flight logs and making notations on the back of the flight logs on the CIA drug operations coming up from Central America. And he had also been recording the conversations of the passengers, including people that rode in his plane that were close to the Bush and Clinton administration. Buddy Young was one of them. He also had direct contact with Ollie North. And they would be passengers on his planes on occasion, and he had a tape recorder back there, and he was recording them. Chip dropped this video on the table and said he had enough, and he walked out. And that was the last he had anything to do with the CIA. Of course, you can imagine what the CIA did to him. They came after him, charged him with the crime, and he served time. He's out now, and he's telling all. He'd be a good speaker for you, by the way. You'd enjoy having Chip come up here. I'll talk to Rob about bringing Chip up here. Anyway, that's just one example. I have another friend. I won't mention his name. He's exposed it. He came forward. He decided he wanted out. He called his wife, who's Swedish. She was in Germany. He said, go to the safety deposit box, get everything out, and I'll meet you in Stockholm. She never made it. She was found dead the next day on a railroad track, suicided. And they charged him with the crime, and he's served his time. He's out on probation right today. But they deal with the people that are turncoats with swiftness and very direct. And if they can't kill you, or they don't kill you, they put you in jail and discredit you. I have another friend, Michael Reconasuda, who's part owner of the Hercules manufacturing in Silicon Valley. developed the bomb, the electrohydrodynamic gaseous fuel device, which was used in Oklahoma City. And we're going to talk about Oklahoma City in a few minutes. I think you'll enjoy that. Anyway, Michael was set up on a drug operation. He's now serving 26 years. Michael's in his 45 years old. He's only served about 4 years, so he'll never see the light of day other than through Crowbars, the Crowbar Motel. But I mentioned a few moments ago about the satanic movement. It's alive, it's well. There's a lot of traffic between Seattle and BC, Vancouver, and what's the island, Victoria? A lot of satanic activity on Victoria Island. I've heard about that island for years, ever since I've been involved in these issues and been researching it. Exchange of children, exchange of information, exchange of research, data, exchange of bodies, and so forth. What do they do? Where do they come up with all this? Well, one of the theorists, or authors you might say, that's widely accepted, and his philosophies are widely used and practiced by the cults, are Aleister Crowley. He liked to be called Crowley, because it rhymed with holy, but I won't give him that benefit. Aleister Crowley wrote a couple of books, and I'm going to tell you and show you what he wrote about human sacrifices. This is kind of crumpled a little bit. It's been well used. This is the book Magic in Theory and Practice. And this is on page 93 of the bloody sacrifice. Blood is very important to these people. They drink it, eat it, whatever. Blood is the life. And this is what it says here. It would be unwise to condemn as irrational the practice of those savages who tear the heart and liver from an adversary and devour them while yet warm. In any case, it was the theory of the ancient magician that any living being is a storehouse of energy, varied in quantity according to the size and health of the animal, and in quality according to its mental and moral character. At the death of the animal, this energy is liberated suddenly. The animal should therefore be killed within the circle, or the triangle, that's a pentagram, of course, as the case may be, so that its energy cannot escape. An animal should be selected whose nature accords that of the ceremony. Thus, by sacrificing a female lamb, one would not obtain any appreciate quantity of the fierce energy useful to a magician who was invoking Mars. In such a case, a ram would be more suitable, and this ram should be virgin. The whole potential of its original total energy should not have been diminished in any way. Now listen to this. For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. That's one of the reasons they get their hands on these kids. This is another book by Aleister Crowley. The Law is for All. This is their justification for rape and sex. Illicit sex, that is. Moreover, the B666, that's Aleister Crowley himself, advises that all children shall be accustomed from infancy to witness every type of sexual act, as also the process of birth, lest falsehood, fog, and mystery stupefy their minds, whose error else might thwart and misdirect the growth of their subconscious system of self-symbolism. What they're saying there is, go ahead. What he's saying there is, try it there.
Everybody stand on your head.
It may therefore be considered improper as a general rule for your sexual gratification to destroy, deform, or displease any other star. Mutual consent to the act is a condition thereof. It must, of course, be understood that such consent is not always explicit. There are cases when seduction or rape may be emancipation or initiation to another. Such acts can only be judged by their results. In other words, it's okay to rape somebody if you're emancipating them. it kind of explains in a nutshell their approach to sex and human sacrifices. Now, is there anybody here that does not know about the McMartin case? Okay, the McMartin case was in, now let's turn it off just a minute, let me get a little background. The McMartin case took place in Manhattan Beach, California in the early 1980s, 82 I think it was, when it broke. A young man came home, told his mother he was sexually molested at the preschool, the McMartin preschool, a very affluent area, right on the ocean. It's upper middle class to rich, wealthy people. The McMartin preschool was, they had a waiting list as long as your arm. People were clamoring to get into the school with their kids, very prestigious. They were the pillars of the community. So the little boy came home, told his mother went to the authorities. They began an in-depth investigation. And the children said that they were sexually molested regularly on a regular basis. These are 2, 3, 4-year-old kids. By the way, I've seen books that the cults have published that tell you how to have sex with 2 years old and newborn children. And the authorities investigated, and basically the kids said that they were taken down into the tunnels under the school. There was a chamber there. Adults in robes, chanting, candles, no clothes under their robes. That they were taken up into the trapdoor, the triplex next door, and placed in automobiles, taken down into the community and prostituted. 2, 3, 4-year-old kids now, folks. And they talked about being placed on an airplane. There was an airport about 10 minutes away. And flying up into the mountains and attending ceremonies in the mountains. They talked about human sacrifices, throwing babies into flames, throwing babies into the crematory. They talked a lot about the brown babies. We think they were Mexican babies and so forth. Therapists interviewed the children, started interviewing the children, began their investigation. And the people on the other side, the defense attorneys and others, because these people were ultimately charged, claimed that the therapists had planted the information in their minds. It wasn't true. The police conducted their own investigation. Basically, it was very super secret. The results were never really made available to the public. And to make a long story short, they had a trial, the longest trial, criminal trial in the history of America, 2 years plus. They tried Virginia McMartin, the old lady, and they tried Ray Bucky, the young son, the grandson of Virginia. Virginia McMartin was acquitted. Ray Bucky had a hung jury. Now, they had a second trial for Ray Bucky. And in the interim, although I had never been really actively involved in investigating that case, everybody's brother was investigating it on their own. In the interim, I was able to gain access to the property. The property had been sold from the McMartin family to Danny Davis, a defense attorney who made $3 million on the case, by the way, paid by the county, to a contractor, and he was going to construct an office building on the property. So, in the spring of '93, I, along with some parents, hired an archaeologist, Dr. Gary Stickle from UCLA, and we went out and started digging for tunnels. Now, before that, of course, we had in the newspaper, April 11, 1985, McMartin and Dick suspended, no evidence of secret tunnels. The authorities supposedly went out looking for tunnels and didn't find any. We found tunnels. The tunnels had been filled in. The children were telling the truth. We found these tunnels, as I said, in the middle of the second trial. We called the DA's office. He sent an investigator out, Mr. Perez. And Mr. Perez told me when he got out of the car, "I don't want to talk to you, Gunderson." I said, "Why not?" He said, "You argue too much." He said, "I'll go talk to the archaeologist." He went in and talked to the archaeologist. I followed him in there. And he wanted to argue with the archaeologists that we did not find tunnels there. Now, what happened is, the tunnels have been filled in. If you took a knife and went straight down, you would have foreign soil to the natural soil in that area that had been pushed into the tunnel area, the cavity of the tunnel. And that was the way that the archaeologist was able to come up with the documentation. In the, here's what we found. We found a 9-foot wide subterranean entrance under the west wall of the dog room. We found avocado tree roots cut on both sides of the entrance. A Disney bag, copyright 1982, found under the foundation right in the entrance of the tunnel. And the tunnel proceeded 45 feet through classroom 4 and 3 and so forth. The tunnels were 30 inches wide, 44 to 46 inches deep, with the top of the tunnel 30 inches under the classroom floor. And we found also a 9-foot wide chamber in among the tunnel, leading just before it goes in from classroom 4 to 3. We found plywood, cinder blocks, etc. for support. We found a 7-foot tunnel extending into the triplex next door. The trap door, we have pictures of the trap door where the kids said they were taken. We found over 2,000 artifacts, and including over 100 animal bones. This case is very important, and I'll tell you why. Because there were, about that same time, a number of other allegations of ritual molestation in preschools around the country and in Canada, the United States and Canada. A number of them. And Dr. Roland Summit at UCLA, Harvard Hospital, who's also involved in research in these matters, made the statement that there were 50 other preschools around the country where the kids talked about tunnels under the school. And as I've been told since I've been here, there were some schools here in Canada where the kids talked about tunnels, and they discounted it because they said we didn't find tunnels in the McMartin case. We found tunnels there. Of course, the newspapers didn't say much about it. A little publicity locally, but we found tunnels. It was covered up. And then there's a movie that came out about this case. They didn't even mention the tunnels. There's also been a documentary on this case, Justice, one of the TV shows, I forget the name of, A&E, American Justice. They didn't mention the tunnels, so we found them regardless. I don't care what anybody says. This is the, let's see, here's the classroom. Move that up just a little bit, will you please, Bill? This classroom 4, the kids said that there were rabbit cages there, and they went into the tunnel under the rabbit cage. This is where the entrance was. I'm going to show you a diagram of it in a minute. This is the tunnel. Here's the chamber I talked about. This goes over to classroom 4 to 3. We didn't have time, but we would have found a tunnel, we think, going up here. This is the tunnel that was in the office, went over and into the triplex next door, the bathroom of the triplex next door. The building was shaded by trees and a lot of vegetation. There's an avocado root there, very significant, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Classroom 3 did not have door handles. They had locks on the door. Didn't even have door handles on it. Every classroom had a fire alarm switch on it that went no place except to the front office. And what it was a warning system, obviously. We found this dish with the pentagram on it and the sandbox about 6 inches below the sand. We tore the place apart, literally. This is the arch of the foundation between classroom 4 and 3. The tunnel went right through there, and there was arch. Now, the building was built in 1966. This was 1993 when we found it. So there's no question in my mind, or in the experts, the archaeologists, that the tunnels were built there at the time the school was built. That's yours truly. Looking it up. Hope I haven't aged too much since 93. This is the wide-angle view of the tunnel entrance. This is the top of the tunnel, 9 feet across there, 56 inches here, And there's the avocado tree, and I'll tell you why, as I mentioned, that's going to be very important. I'll tell you why in just a minute. You want it a little higher? Yeah, okay, got that better. This is the Disney bag. Notice it says class of 82, 83. Well, that was in the mouth of the tunnel and buried under the foundation, which meant that it had to have been placed there sometime in 1982 or subsequent to that date, which is probably when they filled the tunnels in. Now, Mr. Ken Lanning, the so-called expert on Satanism, FBI, Washington, D.C., who says that there is no organized satanic movement, but there are a few dabblers here and there, publicly accused me of picking up that sandwich bag and placing it at that location at the time that we had to dig. Well, that would have been pretty hard to do, to find a 1982 Disney plastic sandwich bag in 1993. Maybe he thought I held it home all that time. I don't know. This is a diagram of the where the plastic bag was found, right there. This is the opening, was like this, shaped like a half moon. And here's the diagram of the tunnel opening also. 9 feet across, 59 inches here. I said 56, 59. The avocado root was cut there. That root right there was alive. A dead avocado root was found over on the other side. So the root, at one time went across here, which established that they had to cut the root of the avocado tree in order to make the entrance to the tunnel. Here's the root itself after we sawed it away from the tree. Very interesting operation. It took us 34 days. Hold it just a minute. It took us 34 days and about $55,000 to $60,000 to locate the tunnels, work it, pay the archaeologists, et cetera, We had concrete cutters come in, cut the floor open. We had radar people with equipment trying to locate ground below that had been disturbed. I personally put $17,000 of my own money into the project, which I haven't happened to doing once I get rolling. Now, another development on the McMartin case that I find interesting is right after the case broke, the day after, there was a house in Crestline up in the mountains that burned down. This is after the case broke in the news media. And I learned about this house, became suspicious, and I went up to Crestline. It's about 100 miles by car. It'd be about probably 20 minutes by jet airplane. There was an airport located 10 minutes away. And drove up to this location. What I found there was very interesting. An obvious abandoned satanic site. I'm going to show you some pictures of the site. This is some ovens. I'm not sure what they cooked in there, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was something that we would prefer not to discuss. The star. Okay. This is probably an altar that had been broken. This was a stone. They use the altar for their sacrifices, by the way. This is some sort of a, I don't know what it is. Looks like a well that's been capped, but there's other significance to it than that, I'm sure. Now this is where the house was. On the other side of this building here, you can see how elaborate this was. This was actually built on the side of a mountain. The street was on the other side of that, of the house. And this was probably about 150 feet long this way, and probably about 3/4 the size of a football field this way, maybe a little less, maybe half the size of a football field. And if you turned around and took a picture in the other direction from where I was standing, this is the valley of the San Bernardino, town of San Bernardino. You can see the elaborate masonry work. It's actually built on the side of the mountain, and all kinds of fill was brought in here. That was no project that was built in a day, believe me. I hear a lot of rumbling. Maybe it's Satan, huh? 666 at the spot. This was a round, large circle. Our camera equipment wasn't sophisticated enough that we could take pictures of everything. Put the other layer over and underneath like we did yesterday. Here's, you gotta get your glasses out. Okay, there were some symbols there that were painted on the concrete. Look at this. So we took pictures of the symbols and did a little research. And this is what this is. This is Asmodee, a strong and powerful king, appears with 3 heads. The first like a bull, the second like a man, and the third like a ram. He has a serpent's tail, webbed feet of a goose, vomits fire. He rides an infernal dragon, carries lance and pennon, and is the chief of the power of Ammon. He must be invoked bareheaded, or otherwise he will deceive. He gives the ring of virtues, teaches arithmetic, geometry, and all handicap crafts, answers all questions, makes men invisible, indicates the places of concealed treasures, and guards them if within the dominion of Ammon. Ammon is a god higher than Ammon's day. Here's another symbol that we found there. You want to put the overlay on there, Bill?
Which one's back there?
No, there's one there.
Oh, okay.
You got it. Okay. There's this was Belial, a mighty king created next after Lucifer appears in the form of a beautiful angel seated in a chariot of fire. Went through the so these folks can see it up at the top. He first fell amongst the superior angels who went before Michael and other heavenly angels. He distributes preferences of senatorships, causes favors of friends and foes, and gives excellent familiars. He must have offerings and sacrifices made to him. And there's another symbol. We never did find anything that would match that in the way of our research. And this is another case. Let me explain this case first. This is a case of a young man, Matt Bear, and a case involving child protective services in the courts. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I received a call from the father, Lou Bear, and he was divorced from his wife, and the two boys had been split visitation between him and his ex-wife, and the ex-wife had a boyfriend who was sexually molesting the boys. And Lou sought relief through the courts, did not obtain the relief he wanted, and decided to take his boys and go underground. He went underground for about 4.5 months, and the great FBI came in, apprehended Lou, took the children, gave them back to the ex-wife with the boyfriend. Children to this day, as far as I know, are continuing to be sexually molested. Now, it was worse than that. It was ritualistically sexually molested. And when the boys were in custody of the father, they thought that they made a clean getaway, didn't have to face his ex-wife or the boyfriend again. They started drawing pictures. Matt Bear started drawing these pictures unsolicited, and this is what Matt drew. Now, when I was this age, I remember I used to draw airplanes and cars. The girl used to draw flowers and birds, right? Anyway, Matt on his own, Matt Bear drew these pictures. Table, people have no cloth on, people, fire, devil, knife. Obvious satanic ceremony of some sort, or ceremony anyway. People in a circle, fire, altar, trees. An altar, obviously, bone, liver, blood, kidney. is an altar, undoubtedly. A body tied down, blood, obviously. Notice the genitals. The genitals are significant in that there was a survey by UCLA involving children who have never been sexually molested, children who have been sexually molested, and children who have been ritualistically sexually molested. The children who have never been molested, when they drew pictures at random, none of them drew the genitals. Those who have been sexually molested, some drew them, and a higher percentage of those who have been ritualistically sexually molested drew the genitals. This is again, a baby into the fire, people, and so forth. This is the most significant picture of all. It's a totem pole with the ghost head at the top. Normally, these are used in the highest levels of satanic ceremonies, and they're 3 to 6 feet in height. And the purpose of my analyzing these photographs and going back to Philadelphia and testifying on behalf of Lou Pair was to say that as an expert in these fields, and although I am considered an expert, I'm not, because the only ones that are really experts are the ones that are actively involved themselves. But I have qualified in the courts as an expert on satanic occult matters, and I was going to testify that based on my research, and in my opinion, this symbol, the totem pole with the goat head, is significant because it's used at one of the higher levels of satanic practice in their ceremonies. And that was how I was going to testify. The judge wouldn't even let me in the courtroom, which is so typical of occasions when I attempt to help families and so forth. These are the 8 main satanic holidays. I understand that one of them was left out, September the 9th, February 2nd, March 21, April 30, June, August, September, October, and November. December, excuse me. Now let's talk about missing children. This is a Reader's Digest article, July 1982, 100,000 children disappear every year and are never heard from again. We're not talking about runaways, we're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old children. In connection with my research, I have located, actually I didn't do it, a customs agent did it for me and for you, an organization, Washington, D.C., known as the Finders. And the Finders is a CIA covert operation been active since the early 1960s. They specialize in the international trafficking of children. Now, February 5, 1987, the police in Tallahassee, Florida received an anonymous phone call, and the caller said that there were 2 well-dressed men, and I think 6 or 7 young children, ages 2 to 6 and 7, in the park. The children were shabbily dressed, unkempt, and so forth. Police proceeded to the location. The children said that they were going to a smart school in Mexico. The police searched the van. They found 2 locations in Washington, D.C., a warehouse and an office. Sent the information to the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C., and the Metropolitan Police conducted a search of the premises with the search warrant, and it was surprising what they found. They, there's the 2 addresses, Washington, D.C. Push that up. Yeah. Upon arriving there, this is a customs agent report, by the way. Push that all the way down to see the title on it. It'll be on another title, another page in a few minutes. Anyway, we learned, the customs agent learned about the case. An informant had given him information regarding a cult known as the Finders, operating various businesses out of a warehouse, etc. Push it all the way up. The information provided by the informant to Detective Bradley of the Metropolitan Police, he was able to match some of the children in Tallahassee with the names of children known alleged to be in custody of the Finders. And they talked about, the information was specific about blood rituals, sexual orgies involving children. And he was able to, Bradley, the Metropolitan Police Officer, was able to match the tentative ID of the adults with known members of this group and keep going. Executed the search warrant, and what did they find? They observed numerous documents which described explicit sexual conduct between the members of the community known as the Finders. Also saw a large collection of photographs of unidentified persons. Some of the photographs were nudes, believed to be members of the Finders. Numerous photographs of children, some of them, at least one of which was a photo of a child on display and appearing to accent the child's genitals. I was only able to examine a very small amount of the photos at the time. One of the officers presented me with a photo album for my review. It contained a series of photographs of adults and children dressed in white sheets participating in blood rituals. Talked about the execution of at least 2 goats. Talked about the portrayal, execution, disembowelment of a skinning and dismemberment of goats at the hands of the children. You've got children doing this. Discovery of a female goat's womb and the baby goats inside the womb. A presentation of a goat's head and one of the children. Goat's head at the top of the totem pole, right? Further inspection of the premise disclosed numerous files relating to activities of the organization in different parts of the world, ladies and gentlemen. Locations I observed were London, Germany, the Bahamas, Japan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Africa, Costa Rica, and Europe. And the list goes on. Talked about the process undertaken appears to have been a systematic response to local newspaper advertising for babysitters. They were gathering intelligence information on private families and the video room, set up an indoctrination center. And he was told that all the evidence would be made available to him at a later date. By the way, before I go to the last page, let me mention that the instructions were found there, including the impregnation of female members of the community, purchasing children, trading and kidnapping. There were telex messages using MCI accounts numbers between the computer terminal believed to be located in the same room and others located across the country and in foreign locations. Another telex expressed an interest in secret bank situation, high-tech transfers to the United Kingdom, numerous properties under the control of the Finders, interest in terrorism, explosives, and the evasion of law enforcement. Okay. So, he was told he'd be furnished all the details. We'll put that down just a little bit, wait so we can see the title. This is, again, a U.S. Customs Treasury Department report. So he arrived at the Metropolitan Police Department April the 2nd. This customs agent did, expecting to be receive a full briefing of the situation. And here's what he said. I was advised that all the passport data had been turned over to the State Department for their investigation. The State Department in turn advised the Metropolitan Police that all travel and use of the passports by the holders of the passports was within the law, and no action would be taken. By the way, they found passports in the van. This included travel to Moscow, North Korea, and North Vietnam from the late 1950s to the mid-1970s. Travel was illegal out of America at that time. We were at war with them. The individual further advised me of circumstances which indicated that the investigation into the activity of the Finders had become a CIA internal matter. The Metropolitan Police report had been classified secret and was not available for review. I was advised that the FBI had withdrawn from the investigation several weeks prior, and that the FBI Foreign Counterintelligence had directed the Metropolitan Police Department not to advise the FBI Washington field office of anything that had transpired. No further information will be available. No further action will be taken. The Finders, CIA covert operation since the early 1960s. Let's talk a little about guns. I was talking on the break to a couple of gentlemen, and we were talking about, they were telling me about how they're taking guns. They've taken the guns away from you. They want you to register your guns. Thomas Jefferson, one of our presidents, made the statement, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. You can't have vigilance if the population doesn't have guns. There's no protection against a corrupt government if guns are not available to the people. We're going to talk in a few minutes about the militia in the United States, and Bill's going to explain to you what they stand for and what they do. This is an article that appeared in a magazine. Talks about Stockton, California, 27 people shot to death. 1989, 96, Scotland, 16 children. Australia, 96, 36 men, women, and children killed. Shut up. Look at this. CIA mind control experiments. Before you write this off as a far-fetched concept, they remind you that during the 1950s, the CIA was accused and convicted in Congress of conducting mind control experiments using high-powered drugs. These experiments were reported in a congressional report and were the subject of many newspaper reports circulated during the 1950s. Many of our readers will recall the code name given to these experiments by the CIA, MK Ultra. That, folks, was also experiments, includes experiments in Canada. So what's happening around the world? Well, Prime Minister Tony Blair is going to ban all handguns by the end of the year. Our troops, NATO troops, when they moved into a country, August of 97, they seized the weapons of the enemy immediately. The Australians have given up they say assault rifles, all of their weapons, the mass trade for their weapons. And what's happening in the United States? Well, a year ago last Christmas, H.R. 3610 was passed by Congress. And that bill allowed local law enforcement, as well as the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, to set up roadblocks any place they choose in the United States indiscriminately, and confiscate guns, search cars without search warrants, and if their guns are confiscated. They find a gun, you conceivably could go to jail for 5 years. You cannot have a gun in a car through a school zone in the United States because of this legislation that was passed. Even if it's registered and you have a weapons permit, but you can't have a gun unless it's locked up in a case or it's on a rack. So there are all kinds of legislation being introduced in the United States to take our guns away from us. You better hope as Canadians that does not happen, because if it happened in the United States, then it would be very easy for the New World Order, One World Order, the globalists, to come in and take over our country. They take over America, I assure you they're going to take over Canada. Okay, let's talk about Oklahoma City. I think you'll find this very interesting. This was a seismograph. Oklahoma City, April the 19th, 1995. This is a seismograph at the University of Oklahoma. It shows two detonations, one there and one there. This destination was at 9:02 and 3 seconds. This was at 9:02 and 13 seconds, 10 seconds later. Now, what happened in Oklahoma? Turn that off just a minute, let me get a little background. What happened in Oklahoma City? Well, there was a truck bomb, they say. The government says it was an ammonium nitrate bomb, 5,000 pounds, roughly 4,800 pounds. But the evidence indicates and establishes that every explosive expert I've talked to says no way was that an ammonium nitrate bomb. What that bomb was, based on my research, was an electro-hydrodynamic gaseous fuel device, a highly classified bomb developed by Hercules Manufacturing. I mentioned Micro Conasudo a few minutes ago, CIA. And it was under a government contract, manufactured by Dyna Nobel. Now, an ammonium nitrate bomb, 5,000 pound, explodes in 360 degrees, up, down, and crossways in all directions. Also, it is not powerful enough to take that building down as it did. I'm going to tell you that this electrohydrodynamic gaseous fuel device is a directional bomb, and we have definite information that this was a bomb that was used. At the time, there were only 10 people who were capable of building it, highly classified. And why does the government insist on it being a fertilizer bomb? Because McVeigh and Nichols are capable of making a fertilizer bomb. They're not capable of making this barometric bomb. Too sophisticated for them, highly classified. So we did our research. And this is an article, and they talk about agricultural fertilizer pills, when made into ampholytes and ammonium nitrate bomb, had very poor explosive characteristics. They would not detonate efficiently because of their high density, lack of porosity, and heavy inert coating of anti-setting agents. Anyway, this article, move it up, way up, please, Bill. This article, later on, page 2, whatever it is, talks about IRECO, I-R-E-C-O, Incorporated, Salt Lake City, Utah, talks about a bomb that they are and contract to build. 34 bids were solicited in November '89. 2 bids were received. Contracting activity, and the contract number is DAAA 21-90-C-0045, June 14, 1990. That contract number is the contract number for the barometric bomb I'm telling you about. So, we wrote to the Department of the Army. This is public information. It's not classified. And they wrote back there, "Dear Sir, in response to our Freedom of Information Act request, contract number so-and-so, be advised that no information pertaining to that contract number has been located." You just saw it in a newspaper article. And now they say it doesn't exist. Cover up, cover up. Okay, we wrote to Dana Nobel, the Public Relations Department, Dana Nobel. And we asked them to furnish a brochure, receive general information. Our interests are purely academic. We have no litigation motives of any sort, nor are we working for any clients in this matter. Send your responses, and we're asking specifically for this bomb right here, that's a contract number. And we didn't receive a response. We still haven't received a response. We called them on the phone. They won't have anything to do with us. I don't know why. We're pretty nice guys, you know. Anyway, here's the, we're going to compare the Oklahoma City bomb with the bomb in Saudi Arabia. There's Saudi Arabia. Notice the shear straight across the building. There's no half moons, indentations, or anything else there. Notice the size of the crater. Huge crater. Move it up high, will you please, Bill? Okay. Later on, 23 kilo, 5,000-pound bomb, ammonium nitrate bomb, same as they claim, same as the government bomb in Oklahoma City. 8-story building, the truck was parked 35 feet away. The crater was 85 feet wide. In Oklahoma City, the crater was 30 feet wide. And in Saudi Arabia, it was 35 feet deep. Oklahoma City, 25 feet deep. 2 bombs, same size, entirely different size craters. Here you are, here's your comparison. 4,800 pounds, 30 feet, 85, 20 feet, 35 feet. Here's the Oklahoma City building. Notice the half moon. Now what we think happened is that the truck bomb exploded, directional. 10 seconds later, there was a bomb planted on the inside, which went off. And then there were 2 other bombs that did not explode on the inside. And the reason we know that there were 2 other bombs that did not explode is because we have a video, and it's called Oklahoma City cover-up. It's available, by the way, on the sheet that you have in front of you that you took at the table. And in that video, the TV commentaries are made the day of the bombing. These are taped. And the host of one of the TV shows says, folks, notice people are running from the building. They found a bomb that is not exploded on the inside. And then a short time later, another TV show host said, hey, folks, they found a second unexploded bomb on the inside. This time we're going to find out who did this because it's got U.S. Army written on it. And we've got that on film. U.S. Army written on it. Here's Saudi Arabia again. That was a clean cut across the building. Okay, this is an interesting article. New York Times, October 28, 1993. Turn that off just a minute ago. Okay, why would the government want to blow up their own building? Well, I'll tell you what. The anti-terrorism legislation was authored under the George Bush administration back in the 1980s, and the female author, Department of Justice attorney, publicly made the statement that before this legislation passes, people will have to be killed. Well, in 1993, we had the World Trade Center bombing. And this is an article that documents not only did the FBI know in advance they were going to blow up the World Trade Center bombing, but the great FBI furnished the ingredients for the bomb. It's in this article. Every once in a while, mainstream media slips up, don't they? Don't you love it? Yes, I do. And you know, folks, here it is right here. What happened was Mr. Salam, by the way, first of all, Mr. Yosef, Aman Yosef, the head terrorist, is trained by the CIA. There's that word against CIA, right? He's trained by the CIA. Mr. Salam, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer, was used by the government to penetrate a circle of Muslim extremists. And he very cleverly, he was an informant for the FBI. And when he was interviewed by the FBI, he recorded his conversations with them secretly. And when it came time to prosecute all these extremists, these terrorists, Mr. Salam said, hey, wait a minute, fellas, I got some tape recordings over here in my dresser drawer. I don't think you're going to prosecute me. But what happened here is that Mr. Salam, in discussing the case with his FBI handlers, was told by the FBI that they were going to furnish the ingredients for the bomb. Salam wanted to put in some dummy chemicals that did not explode. The FBI insisted on putting in some explosive chemicals. Okay, not enough people killed. The anti-terrorism bill did not pass. There were 6 people killed, $500,000 in damage, 1,000 people injured. This is Mr. Joseph, the head terrorist, by the way. And now, right after Oklahoma City, 168 people killed, what happens? Anti-terrorism legislation on the fast track. And a year later, it passed. By the way, as soon as the bombing occurred, turn it off just a minute. President Clinton came out and said, 2 Middle East-looking people in a pickup truck were seen driving away, and it has to be militia. And the radio talk show hosts were blamed, guys like me, because we were fomenting the situation. And then McVeigh was arrested some 90 minutes later after he left there by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. He was in jail for like 2.5 days. Nobody knew he was there. But an honest FBI agent out of Kansas City drove down to where they purchased where they rented the Ryder truck, Junction City, Kansas. And he took artist conceptions from the three witnesses, Elliott's Body Shop. And they came out with John Doe 1, John Doe 2, and much to the chagrin, of course, of obviously the people that had planned this behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. John Doe, they had a problem because McVeigh was in custody. By the way, my inside source tells me McVeigh was supposed to go up with the bond, so they would have no witnesses with McVeigh. And so they had a problem. And here we have two artist conceptions out. We have McVeigh in jail. What are we going to do? Obviously, John Doe 1 is McVeigh. You can tell by looking at the picture of him. And so they finally said, oh, we located McVeigh in jail in Oklahoma. And it just so happens that he had a microchip in his butt. And the satellite knew where he was all along, obviously. But what are we going to do about John Doe 2? I mean, John Doe 2 just cannot exist. Well, you know what the government said? They said that the people that gave the artist conception to the honest FBI agent in Kansas City were mistaken. There was no John Doe 2 with McVeigh. That John Doe 2 was actually a private Bunting who was in the Elliott Body Shop the day before, and three people, all three people were confused. John Doe 2 does not exist. Now, the people that indicted McVeigh and Nichols in Oklahoma City, one of them, Hoppy Heidelberg, tried to ask questions during the grand jury about John Doe 2. The prosecutor, who controlled everything that's done in the grand jury room, kept telling him to be quiet, get out, don't talk about that, don't ask those questions, etc., etc. Finally, out of disgust, Hoppy Heidelberg got up and walked out and went public with the information at the risk of going to jail, by the way. He said that the government refused to allow them to explore the identity and information concerning John Doe 2, and furthermore, the government was involved in a cover-up. Hoppy went public with that information. Okay, back to the anti-terrorism legislation. This is in USA Today, April 24, 1995, right after the bombing. Anti-terrorism legislation on the fast track, and it was on the fast track, although it took another year for it to pass. This is a brief summary of it. It allows the government to search without search warrant. The president can label groups as terrorists. Illegal taps, listen to this one, you're going to love this. Illegal taps are legal as long as the police felt he was acting in good faith. Wow, that takes the cake. Firearms sold using the crime later, first 5-year period in jail, you go to jail. Seizure of assets, secret evidence, not face your accuser. It's past. It's history. We're now confronted with that. Okay, this is further information on Oklahoma City. McVeigh's lawyer claims bombing cover-up. Even the lawyer was claiming it. And he was court-appointed by the government. Okay, this is in the London Sunday Telegraph. And the writer is Ambrose Pritchard. I don't see his name on here. Anyway, he came up with Katina Lawson, a friend of McVeigh's, and she said that McVeigh and others, including Michael Brescia later on, who resembled John Doe 2, and a fellow named Andreas Strassmeyer, former German officer from West Germany, and a person who says in the minute he came to the United States to be an informant for the Department of Justice, but says he changed his mind and never was an informant. You can believe that, can't you? Anyway, this lady says that Brescia represents John Doe 2. The government really did nothing about it. And then we have information from another female named Carol Howe. Carol Howe came forward. She was an informant for the BATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. She said that she told the BATF 2 years in advance that there was going to be a bombing of a federal building, either one or two buildings in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or a building in Oklahoma City. She actually went to Oklahoma City herself, cased the Oklahoma City building, and then the bombing occurred. She notified the police immediately, and what do you think the police reaction was? Well, they said that the reason they didn't take any action before that was because the information was too vague. Too vague. But what did they do to Carol Howe for coming forward? Star witness, U.S. turns on her in a bomb case. They indicted her and tried her. Tried to put her in jail. Isn't that beautiful? She was acquitted, by the way. Jury acquits former informant. I called the family when I heard they were trying her and volunteered my services to come testify as to the handling of informants by the federal government. They said they had another expert that would be willing to do that, so they didn't need it. That isn't all. We have another informant that came forward. Gary Gagan. He was working as a courier to transport drugs from the Iranian embassy in Mexico to the United States, entered into an agreement with the FBI in September '94 to gather information about drug operation. He learned about Oklahoma City bombing, and he told the FBI about it. And here's what he says the reason for it. This follows with the pattern of what I've been telling you already. The reason for the bombing by the government to assure the passage of the anti-terrorist bill, to provide a way for the CIA to attain jurisdiction within America's domestic borders, to demonize the patriot and constitutionalist movement in America, and destroy the Gulf War records exposing the U.S. government's experimentation on American GIs. He filed a civil suit against the FBI. He'd been given immunity, and he claims that he told the FBI well in advance they were going to bomb the Murrah building. You can just forget about that page. There's a lot more details to it than this. I have a 186-page report that's available to you folks. Forget about that. And this is his letter, a letter of immunity, and it talks about how they granted the letter of immunity and so on and so on and so forth. Anyway, I'm going to let Mr. Wells give you a little information about the militia, and then we'll take questions and answers. He's going to talk for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have about 20 minutes, 25 minutes of questions and answers if you're interested. There's much more in the Oklahoma City case than that, but that's all we have time for.
When I came up here with Ted Gunderson, I hadn't planned on telling anything about the militia. Therefore, I've got a lot of paperwork and things like that. I came up as his traveling companion, assistant, stuff like that. But there's been such a desire on the Canadian people, so much misconception. Wanting to know about the militia, I decided to take about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever I can get by with, on a subject that I could spend 3 or 4 hours with no effort. Disclaimer to start with, I'm here just to explain what the militia movement is about in the States. I'm not here to advocate the Canadian people setting up a militia unit or anything, what you do in your own country, your own business. The militia movement is, the militia, I should say, is nothing new. Actually, the militia goes back to biblical times where the men of the village would actually have a hoe in one hand, a sword in the other, as they were going about their work. If they were attacked, they defended their village. Men were expected to fall out and defend themselves from other marauding bands, etc., etc. Goes up to more modern times. Here in our own Americas, the Indians would do the same thing. They'd protect their village, bow and arrow, tomahawk, whatever. And bring it up to a little bit more modern time now. Let's bring it up to about the time of the American Revolution, around 1776. Everybody's pretty familiar with that. Our Revolutionary War was fought with militia people. Now, there was actually a militia then, although it wasn't particularly called a militia. It was Americans that were would defend their country, et cetera, if necessary. What actually started the American Revolution was the British came toward Lexington and Concord with the ideas of taking the guns away from the American people. They were going to disarm the American people. This way, it would give the English government complete control over the Americans. So happens that the Minutemen in Lexington and Concord had a different idea, and therefore it was, you've heard the expression, the shot heard around the world. This shot was shot by militia people. The Revolutionary War was fought basically with the militia, and thus we got our freedom. At this case, this time we set up Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and our Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights has 10 amendments to it. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution is known as the Bill of Rights. The first one was freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. The second one right next to that is the authority to keep and bear arms. This is a right to keep and bear arms for the purpose of having a militia. I'd like to point out that the Constitution, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution was restraints against the federal government. This was not giving the American people privileges. This was giving the American people rights. And the second one, like I say, was the right to keep and bear arms. Going up a little bit further, during the Revolutionary War, we have what is known as the militia fighting, Civil War, fighting the Civil War. Militias from different states were formed, and the North and the South were fighting, and both sides were militia, by the way. And as you know, the outcome of the story, the North won. We could go into a big blurb on that. We're not going to, though. So therefore, the militia is nothing new. So what brought about the modern-day militia? First of all, I'd like to mention that Mr. Gunderson mentioned how the media is controlled and has warped what the people have heard. We have another source, too, which is self-appointed experts in certain fields. These self-appointed experts won't take the time or the effort to get the facts, and therefore, by the time the story are filtered down to the garden variety people, they've got a misconcept of what's going on. The United States militia was formed, it's always been there, but the modern day militia, let's say, was revived after Ruby Ridge and Waco. Has anybody not heard about Ruby Ridge? Has anybody not heard about Waco? Very good. And one thing about the militia, the modern day militia, it didn't really start at one place. It started all over the country at one time. At virtually the same time. To go a little bit further, to understand the militia a little bit further, we have to understand what our military structure is like. We have the Coast Guard, the Army, Navy, Marines, the Air Force, the National Guard, and down at the bottom we have the militia, although the bottom no less important. The National Guard was formed just like any other of our armed forces were formed by an act of Congress. A lot of people misinterpret this as saying the National Guard is now the militia. This is wrong. The National Guard is not the militia. The militia are made up of people not in the military, i.e. civilians. We have advantages and disadvantages to being in the militia. First of all, we don't have to obey any unconstitutional laws. If they tell us to do something that is against the Constitution, we have the prerogative of walking away from it. Whereas the military, if you do that, you're going to go to jail. The militia is just a militia. The militia is not, please pay attention, the militia is not a part of the skinheads, the neo-Nazi movement, the white supremacists, the Aryan Nation, etc., etc. We are not racist. In fact, I've been to a number of national militia meetings, I'd like to mention the first one, which is one of the bigger ones in Gregory, Texas, Gregory, South Dakota. And there were representatives from virtually every state in the union, and not once, I'd like to repeat, not once did I hear a racist remark made. We had black and white and everybody else there, mostly white, admittedly. Not once did I hear a racist remark made. The same way down in Dallas, Texas, we had another one. Not once did I hear a racist remark made, and it really irritates me when they say that we are part of the Ku Klux Klan, the Aryan Nation, and we're a bunch of racists. Where they get this is they'll have a meeting of the Ku Klux Klan, the white robes, the burning cross, etc., and they'll show a man there in fatigues, carrying a rifle or something like that, point at him and say, that's a militia member. That is not. He is a Ku Klux Klan member, dressed in fatigues and holding a gun. Again, the militia, the true militia, does not want anything to do with the Ku Klux Klan and the other radical people. In fact, at our militia meeting in Dallas, Texas, the Ku Klux Klan came down, and it was really quite well run. And they wanted to talk to the militia members there and tell what they had to say. We told them we didn't want to listen to what they had to say. Before it was over, we ran them off at the point of a shotgun. And they got the idea, they left. And by the way, when we have our meetings, who was welcome to it? Virtually anybody, including the CIA, the FBI, the local sheriff, the local law enforcement. We invite them to go to our meetings. If we so desire, we want to work with them. It really amuses me when we have a militia meeting and here's a law enforcement out there with a pad and pencil taking license plate numbers. If they walk in, I'll write them a license plate number on the back of my car and give it to them, save them a lot of trouble. Virtually anybody else would too. Again, the only function the militia has is defending and preserving the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We are not into any other things. We're not into abortions. We're not into seatbelt laws. We're not into white supremacy. We're not into this, that, and the other thing. Preserving and defending the Constitution of the United States. We had two big incidents in the United States, which was Ruby Ridge and Waco, Texas. We were not formed up at the time. We are now formed. We have communication. We are dedicated. And I'll tell you right now, there will be no more Waco, Texas in the United States. There will be none. The FBI knows that. The federal government knows that. That's why they want to get our guns away from us. They're not going to take our guns away from us. And one of the FBI agents asked us why we didn't make a move during the Montana standoff there, the Freemen of Montana. I know them, by the way. I know of them. I know a few of the members and not what they say they are in the local news media. We also have the Republic of Texas movement, and they had a standoff with the police down there. So when the FBI asked me at one of the meetings we had down in Austin, Texas a while back, said, okay, if you militia people are as bad as you say you are, why didn't you come to the rescue of the Freemen and the Republic of Texas? I got news for them. I was called. I was ready to go. We had 100 people standing by, militia type, in the same proximity to the Republic of Texas standoff. I said, I'll tell you why. I said, this time you did it right. During Ruby Ridge and during Waco, Texas, when we weren't prepared, they brought in complete violation of our laws, our Posse Comitatus laws. They brought in the military against civilians. Before it was over, our government murdered 86 men, women, and children. 86 American citizens. They were murdered. They shot them, they gassed them, and they cremated them, and then they destroyed the evidence. I said, this time you did it right. I said, you waited them out. You didn't call in the military. Had you called in the military, the militia would have been there. So there will be no more Waco. If there is, the blood of the guilty will mingle with the blood of the innocent, I assure you. I could spend hours on this. The militia, by the way, is in the Constitution. It is mentioned in the Constitution as a viable organization. Also in virtually every state constitution calls for militia. This is all the time I have on this subject. I think we're going to go to a question and answer. We have about 30 minutes. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and also Mr. Gunderson will do.
Questions? Anybody have any questions you'd like to ask? Yes, sir.
Significance of September 9th?
Oh, you mean the Satanic holiday?
Yeah.
Just a minute, I'll get it out for you. Let's ask another question. It's in this book here, the Rob's. What page is that Satanic Holidays on, Rob? 61. 63. You have that book in front of you, it's on page 63. And September the 9th.
Yeah, go ahead if you want. Yeah.
September the 7th, actually, the Feast of the Beast. Marriage of the virgins to Satan. Severe sadistic intercourse with the statue of Lucifer, or the Grand Master addressed to Satan. If you buy this book, it's got all the holidays in it. What I had up there was just a smattering of the basic holidays, and I was told by one of the people that attended the ceremony over in Vancouver that September the 7th was also a holiday that I left off my chart, which would be added. Yes, question?
You know what happened to Bill Cooper?
You mean the radio commentator down in Arizona?
I'm not sure. He wrote a book called Behold the Pale Horse.
Yes. He had his own radio show. I don't know what's happened to him lately.
I read in Rolling Stone magazine that he died.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that. I know he was an alcoholic.
Had a heart attack.
Had a heart attack, yeah. Well, CIA work again, huh? Yeah, yes, sir.
The Oklahoma bombing, the FBI headquarters, were they not there in the 6th or 8th floor of that building?
No, that was, the FBI had their own quarters. Secret Service was there, DEA was there, ATF was there.
All in that building.
And the ATF agents, none of them were injured or killed. None of their children were in the nursery that day. Right after the bombing, a lady was standing across the street shortly after the bombing, within a few hours, and she noticed an ATF agent next to her and said, "Where were you?" And he said, "We were told we didn't have to come to work today. There was a bomb scare." They forgot to tell the other agencies, of course. But you know, there was a bomb scare all over the country because the day before, two of my associates went to the Social Security office in Las Vegas and to the Veterans Administration. They had armed guards on both locations, and they'd never had armed guards on there before. So the government had advance warning to this. In fact, the government was involved. Something I left off of it, by the way. McVeigh, you know, when you get rolling, sometimes you forget little details. McVeigh was, according to the government, flunked out of Special Forces. He did not flunk out of Special Forces. McVeigh was one of 10 outstanding soldiers, handpicked by the CIA, trained as a professional assassin, and also trained to work on the CIA drug operation. And I suspect he was a victim of the MK Ultra mind control program. Dr. Jolly West, head psychiatrist at UCLA, visited him both in Colorado and in Oklahoma. And this was a joint operation by the CIA and the Army. Question? Yes?
Ammonium nitrate would leave residue behind, wouldn't it?
It would leave residue behind, pockets of fire, and the workers would not have been able to go in the first several hours after the explosion because without gas masks, and they did.
Another thing is they decided it was ammonium nitrate bomb after they found ammonium nitrate in their farm, and then they decided it was in blue barrels once they found blue barrels on the farm. So they kind of cut the pattern to fit the cloth.
Here we go. Anybody there? Okay.
I have considerable information that revolves around the New World Order, and I have to concede that I concur that your information provides considerable addition to the information that I have at hand. Now, there are about 4 authors
I have no way of knowing that. I'll make my comments, but I think Bill has his ideas too, so I'll let Bill comment on that also. I suspect, we don't know for sure, but everything points toward a national emergency or crisis of some sort. There's a possibility, since they cut back on welfare checks last year, before last summer, I would say there's a possibility we could have a race riot this coming summer. Because people are having a difficult time economically, particularly the blacks and some of the Mexican folks or the minorities. So I would suspect that that's maybe what they have in mind. And once you have the race riots, then you use that as an excuse to declare martial law, and it'll come all of a sudden, it'll come real fast.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. In fact, I don't know if anybody else has read this book. It's called Final Notes, written by a New Zealander, Gary Smith. I think, yeah, he reports on this stuff again. I think, again, just for speculation, I don't know. I'm sort of curious in some of the conversation we all tend to do that. Because another question could be, what do we all do with this information? Just sit inside our don't know what happens. But Gary Smith did speculate. He said, watch for some activity in the Asian East that could be precluded by a stock market crash. Go to the States, he said, and watch for this too. They'll make their move. Pope George Bush during the Iraqi war, the first one, when he referred at least 3 times to the New World Order, and one situation referred to it as a new economic world order. That was my first exposure, quite frankly, to a politician saying that. But ever since then, I've been extremely suspicious of something happening. The economic world order suggests the possibility of a stock market crash, and then bingo, following up on the cashless society, and that would mean pandemonium overnight.
Yes, I agree with that. Good possibility. Cashless society, we're going to have smart cards in the United States where there will be no checking, no cash. Everything will be a computer in your hand. You run it through the grocery store checkout stand, it automatically debits your account. There's all kinds of possibilities. I think it's building up fairly rapidly now. For years it didn't build too rapidly, but there's going to be, in the New Year's Eve of 1999, it's already been announced, world leaders, including George Bush, will be in Egypt at the pyramids and in celebration of the year 2000. Bill, do you want to comment on anything?
No, Ted's covered it pretty good. The only thing I'd like to mention is a lot of people say catastrophe is going to happen at so-and-so date and time. There's nobody that can predict exactly when it's going to happen. All I can say is it is going to happen, and it's not too far down the road, and it'll come probably when we least suspect it. The only advice I've got is educate yourself, educate all of your friends, and be prepared. I mean, I used to be a Boy Scout leader. Be prepared is the best motto I've ever heard in my life. That covers it all. Grit your teeth, unless things change drastically, it's coming.
Any more questions? Yes.
Does anyone have any credit cards that go beyond the year 1999?
I don't.
What happens after that?
Well, I see. Does anybody in the audience have any? That's an interesting question. You do?
I don't, but I think you're ignoring the obvious. What about January 1st, the year 2000, when all the computers crashed?
Well, I don't think we're ignoring that. I think we're all aware of that. That may be divine intervention too, you know.
There's a perfect way, an opportunity to bring about the New World Order.
True. But they won't be able to function either. We won't be able to function. They won't be able to function. So that'll be a yes. Jerry? Huh?
01.
2001?
Yeah.
Do you belong to the New World Order Society? Gary is a therapist, I assure you. I had the pleasure of meeting with him and his wife, Seven, and I assure you he's not one of them. 2001, well, that shoots that theory down, huh? Yes, sir.
Is there any militia groups in Canada?
No comment. What can I say? I'm not here to discuss that information. If there is, that's hooray for Canada. That's all I can say. But
I can tell you about militia groups in the United States. By the way, a lot of people have asked how many militia people we have in the United States. People kick around numbers all the way from 150,000 to who knows where. Again, these are these experts that say that we have X amount. Nobody really knows. The militia people don't really know how many people we have. The militia people who are directly and indirectly involved in the Patriot movement goes into the millions. When the balloon goes up, how many we can depend on, it'll be quite a few. That's all I can say.
I think you'll see a lot of people come out of the woodwork on that. And any more questions? Yes.
During the Iran-Contra hearings, Senator from Texas asked Aldi North on 2 occasions about plans to suspend the U.S. Constitution, and he was shut down by the chairman of the hearings. I was wondering if you could expand on that at all.
I don't know anything about it, but I know that Ollie North is not a great American. I know that he's involved in the drug operations in Central America. Chip Tatum, ex-CIA Black Ops, one of my sources, has told me that he's personally had conversations with Ollie North, that Ollie North was directly involved in setting up 5 drug camps in Central America, was involved himself. And as far as that conversation is concerned, I just can't comment. I don't know. Do you know anything about that?
I know. I'd rather not say anything.
Yeah, right. We tried it. Yes.
The 2 FBI agents in charge of Ruby Ridge on that campaign, what happened to those fellows?
Do you know, Bill?
I forget the names. They were decorated. Lon Hiroshi, who put a bullet hole in Vicki Weaver's head while she was holding her baby at the door, by the way, is now on trial. He got a medal for that, along with a couple other people. Now, going to Ruby Ridge a little bit, that was unreal. Here's a man who was out in the boonies, wanted to be left alone. They have him down as a white supremacist, by the way. He is a separationist. He was just wanted to be left alone from the mainstream USA. And his wife was murdered. No other way about it. Lon Hiroshi said that he can put bullet holes in a quarter at 200 yards, and he accidentally blew a woman's head off at about the same distance. Plus the fact his son, I believe it was Sammy, was running back after the shooting started. They shot him in the arm, spun him around, and he was running back.
Shot the dog first.
Yeah, shot the dog first, yeah. But spun Sammy around and shot him in the back. A 14-year-old boy. Our people did that. They gave them medals. So now you kind of wonder why the militia is starting. It's not just the militia that's starting it, but this is giving us. So does that answer your question?
Well, I just wondered if those 2 fellows are active still in the FBI. But I think
Lon Hiroshi right now is on trial in Idaho. I can't understand how they're doing it. They said he's going to be tried in federal court under Idaho laws. And how that's going to work, I have no idea. It's 2 separate entities. I don't think anything's going to happen to him.
I smell a rat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More cover-up as far as I'm concerned. Yes.
Back to the Franklin cover-up there, the 2 youngsters, Paul and Alicia, were they not murdered for testifying later on?
No, they're both alive. But Alicia's brother was suicided, and Troy Bonner, who recanted, his brother was suicided. When we say suicide, you know what that means. Yeah, heart attack, suicide, arcicide, whatever you want to call it.
early caller.
Yes. Yes.
It's more of a statement than a question. Everyone keeps saying, when is this going to happen? And this is going to happen, going to happen. I personally think that with people like you, which we really appreciate spreading the word, enough of us know about this, they think they're going to resist us, but that doesn't mean that we can't stop it. And you keep saying divine intervention. I truly believe there's powers that are looking in on this, and I don't think that we're going to let them do this.
I hope you're right. Did you hear that in the back?
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope you're right. I pray you're right. But that's why we're out here.
Yeah.
We're out here to educate. We had some very poor attendance on the West Coast, by the way, and this crowd is very encouraging to us. But like I said, we had 9 and 1, 9 and 2 of them actually. 9 people attended the lectures in school. But
We got sabotaged.
we got sabotaged. Yeah, people called the hall, and they said that that it was by invitation only, which it wasn't, and also they would not identify us as the speakers or me in particular. So you know,
I shared optimism on that one, and I have to apologize. I didn't want to give the impression of being defeated. Mostly I was actually alluding to the possibility that there might be some suggestions along the line. In other words, I still feel handicapped at this point in time. Quite frankly, the city does. Because while we have this information, you know, and some of these power groups are pretty substantial, and the more information you get, the weaker you can. It overwhelms you. And so it would take a lot of structuring, and it would take, from a sports perspective, a miracle, you know, in terms of people who are always last to know, that's the general public, to be able to do something about this. It's extremely difficult, and I don't have any suggestions offhand other than becoming a Canadian militiaman, quite frankly, but you gotta be tough at this stage.
Well, you do have one advantage over us Canadians. You do have rights. We have no rights. We have no property right. We have no right to a driver's license. We have no right to a pilot's license. We have no rights with anything. It's
I tell you what, our rights are very rapidly being turned into privileges. I'll give you an example on the gun issue again, which I'm well into. I have to have a permit to carry a concealed weapon. And this should not be according to our Constitution. I should be able to carry any weapon I want. And but they are quickly turning all of our rights into privileges. So that's one thing right there. Oh, okay.
We had yes, another question here.
Yeah, I'm curious, do the families of the victims of this Oklahoma bombing have any idea of this? I've been hearing this ever since it happened. I wonder have they got any idea?
You mean it's a government cover-up?
Yeah, the
I think they have an idea, but they're not vocal about it. I went back to one of the meetings, and the families were all the victims of the family members were there of the victims, and they were more concerned, very frankly, about getting paid the welfare checks, getting the checks that their husbands or their daughters or their wives had coming, and you know, that was the main theme of it. But interesting, the incident occurred. There were people planted there who riled them up, and some of the first ones that came up and objected to this meeting, I was there with Assemblyman Keyes, General Pardon, and some other individuals. We gave a press release, and there were some troublemakers in there, and they were obviously planted there to stir up the relatives, and it worked. And a bunch of them ended up walking out with the agitators. They're pretty well organized. But in answer to your question back there in the back, sir, what I try to do is I try to get everybody to purchase my research. Now, if you can't afford it, go together, buy it as a group, get it up here, and make copies and distribute it. You know, I don't copyright anything I do. If it's got my name on it, you make copies and get it out. That's all I'm in the business to do, is to educate. So I hope that you will take these flyers back with you and get a group of you together, order it together. Everybody throw in $10 and get one of everything, and get the copies, and then make your own copies and get them out. I think it's important that we all know, and maybe if we're educated and have advanced warning, we're giving you some pretty good information here tonight. Maybe we can prevent this thing from occurring. I don't know. We can sure try, yes.
On your price list that you have up here, we send that out to award in California, that's U.S. funds, Canadian funds.
That's U.S. funds, so if you want to throw a few extra dollars in there, it'd be fine. Yeah.
I'd like to say one more thing about the militia. Before we close, a lot of people think that somehow or another we are supported finance-wise. Everything the militia people put out comes out of their pocket. So a lot of people say we're making money on the militia movement. Wrong, we're not.
Thank you. I just want to update you a little bit on militias around the world. There are citizens' militias that have now formed in France, Sweden, Norway, Britain, Australia, the United States. Is it illegal in Canada? It's not in our Constitution. It's not legal, but it's not illegal. There will be a constitutional challenge to start up a Canadian volunteer militia. Also, too, after the American people found that their federal government had lied to them about the Oklahoma bombing and blaming the American militia movement, the militias rose in the United States from 300,000 to 12 million members in a year and a half. That was in 1996, and it's growing by every month. The militias across the United States involve both men and women from all walks of life, and I can too verify that they're not terrorists. They're your everyday citizens that are concerned very much about our future and our welfare under this new world order. There is a lot we can do. These big boys of the trilats that are in Canada, that are controlling our government and our resource companies, can be brought down. All that needs to happen is that they be brought forward into the public light and exposed for who they are. We can stop this new world order. They don't have to win. It doesn't have to be that way. Thank you.
I'm not sure. I believe we have a closing time of 10 o'clock here. Is that right? Okay, which gives us about 5 minutes. Personally, myself, I would like to say I'm glad I came to Canada. I'll be honest with you, when Ted called me up and said, hey, let's go to Canada, I figured, well, hey, this is going to be fun. It's kind of a lark. This has been an education in more ways than one. I've been to Canada a couple other times. It's a fantastic place. And I hope I come back again. I hope they let us come back again. When I was coming in here the first time, I wasn't sure if we were going to make it at all. But anyway, you've been a fantastic audience. I hope we've give you a little information you can use, and hope to see you around and all this good stuff. And here's Ted.
And I want to also mention, I'm really impressed. You people are fantastic. I really enjoyed meeting and visiting with you. I'm impressed with your countryside. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And particularly your teenagers. I'm so impressed with your teenagers. I'm proud of you folks for what you've done with those kids. I'm sorry to say our teenagers are a mess alongside your Canadian teenagers. That's the future of the country, you know. And so anyway, thanks for the reception. Thanks for everything. Be sure to educate yourself. Buy one of everything, split it, share it, send it to 5 people, have them send it to 5. It'll get out pretty soon. 1 million people will have copies of these reports. Thanks a lot, folks. Don't forget that Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phelps will be here, I think, next month sometime.